The rain fell in gentle, persistent sheets against the weathered stone facade of the Imperial outpost on Helios Minoris, a rhythmic patter that drummed a familiar, melancholic rhythm against the window pane, instantly transporting archivist Cato Torrentus back decades. To him, that sound was intricately woven with the scent of damp parchment and worn air recirculators, the very essence of the scholastic monastery on his birthworld, Hydro. How many nights had he spent there, nestled in a high-vaulted scriptorium, listening to similar rains while his eyes traced ancient texts or flickering data slates, absorbing the sanctioned history of the Imperium. Now, 3 decades and several sectors distant from those echoing halls, the same rain lured him to the same solitary pursuit. His posting to Helios Minoris had been no random reassignment. It was a calculated choice steered by his silent desires. A temperate, Earth-like world, positioned tantalizingly close to the nebulous borders of the expanding Tau sphere. When petitioning the vast machinery of the Administratum, he had dutifully cited the planet's strategic importance as an observation post, yet his true motivations simmered far beneath that plausible surface. This gentle world, with its vast, moody oceans and fertile coastal plains sheltered beneath temperate skies, existed in a fragile state of semi-ignominy close enough to the contested Tau territory to attract curious or desperate souls fleeing its influence or embracing its promises, yet far enough from the grinding heartland of the Imperium that the heavy hand of imperial bureaucracy remained blessedly light, often forgetting this quiet corner entirely. Port Vigilance itself reflected this peaceful neglect, a humble collection of damp stone buildings huddled within the protective curve of a natural harbor on the Meridian continent's northern coast. Its scant population of barely 5,000 souls eked out a living hauling silvery shoals from the bountiful, sometimes treacherous Tabrian Sea, or bartering preserved ocean bounty with the farmers cultivating the rich inland plains. The small Imperial naval listening post that lent the settlement its overly ambitious name maintained a token detachment. Their vox arrays pointed eternally toward the stars, but otherwise, the planet hummed along with minimal Imperial interference. For Torrentus, this unassuming backwater offered a sanctuary bearing an almost sacred value, the precious, rare freedom to pursue his true work beneath the radar, free from the constant, suffocating scrutiny of higher authorities. The steady, almost rhythmic trickle of arrivals at the modest spaceport merchant captains, sporting exotic bruises and strange accents seeking to offload silicate crystals or siphon water. Weary retired guardsmen, their faces carrying the etched maps of forgotten battlefields, searching for a quiet berth to spend their scarred years. Even the occasional steelied missionary gathering their nerve before plunging into the contested fringe worlds, all became vital streams feeding his research. They brought with them the dust of distant stars and whispered fragments of the vast galaxy beyond this rain-slicked pier. Officially, his mandate mandated chronicling the insignificant local history and maintaining the dusty settlement archives, a duty he discharged with tidy, orthodox efficiency. Yet beneath this facade, he had cultivated a different reputation entirely, that of the genial, unassuming archivist, perpetually eager to listen, to offer shelter and a warm bowl of fish stew in exchange for tales of strange ports and stranger neighbors, especially those concerning the blue-skinned empire expanding relentlessly across the eastern fringe. The modest chamber in which he practiced this subterfuge served double duty as both his austere living quarters and heavily burdened study, illuminated now only by the warm, flickering amber sphere of a single oil lamp casting deep, shifting shadows among the piled books and scrolls, and the unwavering, clinical blue glow emanating from a data slate propped beside him. The air hung thick and still, layered in a complex melange of scents, the comforting must of aging paper leagues deep, counterpointed sharply by the biting chemical tang of precious archival preservation fluids, all undercut by the distant, pervasive brine and ozone tang of the Tabrian Sea, finding its way through the window he'd deliberately left ajar. He suffered the encroaching damp and the chill mist that ghosted across the scratched obsidianic floor. It offered a reprieve, however slight, from the oppressive coastal humidity that perpetually grated on his constitution, inherited from long generations spent within the damp, shadowed halls of autarch monasteries. Outside, beyond the glistening, rain-slicked cobblestones reflecting the sparse light streaming from shuttered tavern windows, the immense, dark expanse of the Tabrian Sea stretched out into the ink-black horizon, silent except for the eternal sigh of waves against the breakwater. It was the lifeblood of Port Vigilance, its churning depths providing sustenance and coin for the stoic inhabitants. Clusters of sturdy fishing vessels, their hulls scarred by countless ocean trials, rigging heavy with crystallized salt from years of battling sea spray, lay straining gently at their anchors out in the bay, rocking hypnotically with the tidal pulse, their crews undoubtedly huddled safely from the downpour in one of the warm, noisy harbor taverns, voices raised in salt-stained tales. Torrentus ran a thin, ink-stained hand slowly over the thinning gray strands swept back from his high forehead, the knuckles prominent, before refocusing watery blue eyes upon the costly parchment before him. A rasping scratch filled the quiet as his quill, plucked from a native seafowl with unexpectedly robust plumage, scraped another line of careful, precise script, adding yet another meticulous piece to the towering, dangerous edifice that had become his life's consuming purpose, a definitive, utterly heretical treatise on the Tau Empire. Behind him, punctuating the rhythmic drumming of the rain, came the soft, persistent clicking, grinding, and tiny pneumatic hisses of a blood cognomen servitor, its once-human hands and augmented optic lenses moving with programmed, oblivious precision. It silently indexed the day's harvest, microspools recording clipped interviews with rogue traders who dared commerce with Xeno's captains, garbled cracklings of usually indecipherable Vox intercepts picked up by the naval outposts straining long-range augers at the shadowed borderlands, transcribed accounts dictated by battle-scarred Imperial Guard veterans, whose shattered units somehow endured contact with swift-striking fire-cast hunter cadres. The mechanical drone of its continual low-grade activity blended seamlessly with the gentle percussion of rain on ancient stone and glass, forming a cocoon of sound within the sea-scented dark. Abruptly, slicing through the ambient drone and distant wavesong, came the deep, resonant rumble of mass drivers firing in sequence for landing thrust, the unmistakable arrival signature of a merchant ship, heavy-laden or possessing crude gravitational compensators. The noise swelled, building to a thunderous bellowed crescendo that vibrated the remains of the cold recaf machinecloth dispenser resting on a nearby shelf, before diminishing rapidly into an echoing silence punctuated by secondary systems cycling down. Another visitor had arrived at the rudimentary spaceport coordinates scribbled less than a kilometer away from Torrentus' window. Soon, port vigilance would have new faces walking its watery cobbles, new voices murmuring in its taverns, possessing pasts he hadn't yet cataloged. Perhaps they held new sources, freshly minted perspectives, elusive fragments of understanding to be plucked and integrated into his grand mosaic of the blue-skin phenomenon. His fascination, this compulsive, perilous draw towards the Tau, hadn't sprung from detached scholarly interest or banal imperial patriotism, but was rooted deep in enduring personal tragedy, a wound scabbed over but never truly healed. During his perilous tenure as a near-infantile junior scribe hastily attached to the teetering administrative apparatus of the ill-fated Damocles Gulf Crusade, he had been present at the chaotic, panic-ridden twilight moments over Daleth Prime. Amidst the deafening roar of strained engines, frantic shouts of evacuation officers, and the stink of pure terror saturating the landing bay's air scrubbers, he'd witnessed, through a rapidly closing pressure hatch portal, a moment seared into his soul. An Imperial guardsman, grievously wounded and abandoned in the disorderly retreat, was not summarily executed as Imperial doctrine dictated when encountering Xenos. Instead, a figure clad in the smooth Tau battlesuit of the watercast, its alien features immobile, mask-like, knelt beside the broken form, administering biogel from a delicate device. The vision lasted mere heartbeats before the shuddering liftoff violently wrenched his gaze away, upward into the violent black of the void. Yet in those fleeting, stark seconds, seeds of corrosive doubt were irrevocably planted in his impressionable young psyche. Doubts about the infallibility of the Emperor's righteous path, doubts about the inherent inhumanity attributed to all alien life, doubts that the Imperium, in its grinding, ceaseless cruelty, was humanity's only viable destiny. That single seed, watered years later by horrific irony, had germinated with unexpected vigor. Assigned to compile debriefing testimony and assist in interrogating a defiant human merchant apprehended after openly trading restricted augury components with Tau elements far beyond the sanctioned borders, Torrentus had encountered the merchant's quiet, resolute heresy. The man displayed no shame, only weary defiance. He spoke not of monsters, but described sleek, efficient Tau cities where technical advancement smoothly erased the squalor plaguing Imperial hive worlds, of a society existing without the pervasive, soul-crushing oppression enforced by the Adeptus Arbites and the Ecclesiarchy's harsh dictates, where human integration, however controlled, occurred based on demonstrable contribution rather than privileged birth or ill-gotten wealth. Torrentus had meticulously transcribed the poisonous testimony, his expressions schooled to detach bureaucracy, delivered the formal report detailing the merchant's inevitable sanction-loaded fate to his superiors, yet secreted away a clandestine copy secured within a masterfully forged data wafer, nestled deep within an innocuous Shrine-Toasty dispenser unit in his former quarters. Over the subsequent decades, quietly, painstakingly, Torrentus had gathered hundreds upon hundreds of similar testimonies, gleaned from frightened refugees fleeing Tau expansion zones, transcribed hushed confessions from deserters unable to reconcile their oath with imperial barbarity witnessed on forgotten planets. Recorded the almost evangelical murmurings of imperial failure points, where water-caste diplomats spread the insidious gospel unified under the concept they termed the greater good. He had pored over fragments of intercepted Tau texts slowly acquired by his increasingly sophisticated network for considerable cost, painstakingly translating abstract philosophical treatises, outlining their codified social contracts, observing their caste delineations. In moments of purest, deepest heresy, moments that would see his soul condemned to an eternity of torment should even the faintest echo leak out, he found himself conceding points of logic within their systems, acknowledging the brutal efficiency of fire caste stratagems that far surpassed the rigid Imperium doctrine, the pragmatic guile displayed by water caste negotiators beyond the typical imperial xenophobia-drenched contempt for subtlety. The blinding pace of technological innovation springing from the Earth caste workshops that made Mechanicus orthodoxy seem ossified beyond redemption. What he had learned through meticulous collation and observation stood in absolute contradiction to every sanctioned lesson the Scholastica Psychona had ever instilled regarding hostile xeno species. These Tau were not the mindless, swarming beasts of an orc wagh, nor the cruelly decadent, infinitely ancient puppeteers of the Eldar, nor the cold, relentless terminators crafted by the Necrons in eons past. They were terrifyingly, fascinatingly other, an alien race paradoxically young, their foundational myths and technologies traceable back only scant millennia, yet displaying a societal cohesion and singular purpose that suggested a maturity tragically lost to humanity's long-sundered age of Terra. Why they existed, how they orchestrated such rapid growth. Most imperial savants, cocooned in terracentric arrogance, dismissed the Tau as ephemeral irritants, a minor Xeno's bloom easily crushed under the Imperium's boothiel if it truly deigned to turn its limitless legions eastward. Torrentus knew bone deep they were monstrously wrong. His gathered accounts, analyzed 100 ways, revealed the terrifyingly adaptable brilliance of fire caste commanders, turning scrap defenses into bloody funnels for 10 times their number of guardsmen, relayed the dizzying speed at which unfamiliar Earth caste systems shifted paradigms plasma weaponry, advancing iterations in decades where Imperial ancestors stagnated for millennia. Pervading it all, the corrosive, hydra-headed appeal of the greater good whispered like poison gas through cracks in Imperial defenses, seducing weary miners on exhausted hellholes, forgotten agri-world serfs, artisans suffocated by Mechanicus dogma. Understanding the Tau in their totality was not solely academic inquiry, it was crucial intel, a vital key humanity desperately needed for its own survival against this cohesive, technologically escalating tide rolling relentlessly towards them. Yet sometimes, in the deepest watches of the sol-absent night, when the ever-present rain hushed to a whisper and the servitor ceased its rhythmic clicks, power cycling into quiescence, Torrentus permitted a treasonous ember to glow furtively in his mind's most sequestered vault. Perhaps a terrifying, almost unspeakable perhaps through rigorous understanding, in deciphering the origins and successes, and perhaps eventual frailties of the Tau experiment, humanity might also claw its way back towards a sliver of its own nascent noble potential, a fragment of generosity, a molecule of self-determination utterly obliterated in the long, grinding eons of perpetual warfare and systemic oppression that defined its current existence since the heresy tore the galaxy asunder. This dangerous spark he shared with no living thing, interring it deep within meticulously orthodox commentaries, encasing it in layers of patriotic certainty carefully constructed for his officially published and carefully redacted evaluations submitted to the Sector Administratum. The soft, almost crystalline chime of the precisely calibrated wall chronometer broke the heavy silence, marking the fractional shift of another incremental hour safely traversed. Outside the thick, rain-lashed window overlooking the harbor, the downpour persisted with sodden patience, washing accumulated salt grime from the porous stones of the settlement streets with relentless hydrological diligence. Inside the clutter-choked sanctuary subdued by lamplight and the scent of knowledge preserved against mortality, Archivist Cato Torrentus dipped the worn seafall's nib once more into the obsidian inkwell. Each phrase meticulously chosen, each complex sentence forged on the pristine parchment before him, became another obscure tesserae laid into the towering, secret edifice he labored upon in isolation. A structure he desperately hoped would stand as a formidable bulwark against the expanding Tau Empire, providing the Imperium the sharp-edged tools needed to resist assimilation or collapse. Or perhaps, just perhaps, though the thought provoked such profound dread, he immediately locked it away again in the deepest vault of his consciousness, The final, completed work might stand as a fragile, improbable conceptual bridge, spanning the terrifying gulf of ignorance and hostility yawning between two profoundly different intelligences. A whisper suggesting that they warring siblings flung apart by cosmic chaos might each possess insights the other desperately needed to truly endure in the bleak galactic dark, insights neither would currently acknowledge humbling themselves to consider. For was this not the ultimate, most stringent imperial axiom carved onto every Scholastica Psychona entrance stone? In knowledge resides power, and secreted within its pursuit lay the slender, winding path towards salvation for a fractured species. And if humanity were to weather the increasingly volatile ideological and military tempest gathering with terrifying speed upon its neglected eastern marches, it would require Torrentus to offer it every single shard of both power and salvation he could claw from the shadows, ink upon parchment, a defiant flicker against the void outside. Their story, these Tau he sought to dissect as much as comprehend, began with a chronological brevity, breathtakingly audacious, against the unfathomably ancient sagas of mankind's own swollen imperial eons stretching back eons upon eons, or the elder nightmares of the unutterably old Eldar Empire, whose decaying carcass now birthed god monsters like rot breeds maggots. A mere 6,000 Terra Standard years ago, when unyielding explorator probes dispatched by the Mechanicus questing blindly at the galaxy's extremities finally breached space claimed by their stellar conclave, sensors barely registered the designated planet Tau. A world swathed in biology, dotted with primitive insular settlements, where unrelated tribes composed of distinctly differing blue-skinned, cloven-hoofed fauna huddled around guttering fire pits for protection against savage predators they considered constant dangers. They clutched simple stone axes, scraped skins with flint, utilized basic pulley systems, demonstrating just early mastery of large-earthed wheels. The hooded Lex mechanics mapping this encounter dutifully logged and categorized the insignificant cluster of barely sentient barbarians, tagged the star system for future monitoring should any Enlightenment signal develop, recalibrated their void engines, and departed without trace, any contemplation of threat or concern tucked placidly within tidy databanks destined for redundant archives. In the merest flicker of cosmic reckoning, a time span where human progress might barely manage to transition from steam engines to orbital slingshots, the Tau accomplished the astronomically improbable. They evolved with a frightening, seemingly orchestrated velocity, rooted primitive hunters grimly clutching stone tools, then suddenly stamping outdated industrial furnaces onto Aegis-card landscapes. Then theoretical boundaries shattered as the first sleek disc-shaped vessels breached atmospheric confinement toward orbiting ships welding gravity defiance into quantum-thick armor. The transition eclipsed any comparable known species development by dizzying orders of magnitude across entire humanities of normally glacial epochs, compressed incandescently by anomalous acceleration into mere 6 millennia. Fine Mechanicus observers eventually argued within cloistered academies, pulsing with dubious data feeds over inconclusive anthropological theories regarding catalyst climactic shifts forcing rapid cerebral enhancement or unexpected interaction with salvageable Xenos artifacts orbiting a Sol-skewed photonic spectrum star. But the Tau accounts targeting ungreater good species offered focused attribution to their rigidly codified histories. They trace this ferocious ascent crucially to an era they recount with profound horror, the Montau, the unpropitious age of terror, before their distinctly subspecies coalesced into the strict, globally uniform societal framework dictated by birth now synonymous with imperial encounters. Fire, water, air, earth Tau were fractured entities adapted millennia apart to distinct hazardous biomes across their dense homeworld ecosystem prime. Those mastering vast open plains endured burdensome gravity, nurturing powerful musculatures, evolving into natural hunters and pack warriors honed by open ground predatory clashes against savage megafauna thundering across desolate steppes. Coastal archipelago dwellers, navigating treacherous tidal inundations linked by extensive shallow mangrove channels and resource-rich coral colonies, cultivated leaner forms resilient to salinity, mastering sailing rigid-hulled skipcrafts beneath volatile skies long before considering spaceflight. They became inevitably adept traders and inter-island mediators who mapped mysterious seamount fortresses. Mountainous range inhabitants clinging to unstable cliff niches, exposed to near-hypoxic thin atmospheres gained holes in skullbones reducing mass and membranes along forearm joints, allowing remarkably potent atmospheric gliding divs that transmuted treacherous alpine passes into shortcuts accessible only to streamlined aerial specialists. Dwellers in fertile flood basins dotting temperate lowlands developed intricate irrigation systems, requiring precise cooperation, thus becoming adept architects and domesticators, cultivating complex fungus strains and domesticated, vespid, allied symbiotes within sheltered ecological microniches, which later prompted specialization in base construction and ecological reformation paradigms. These profound physiological and profound ingrained subcultural divergences laid essential foundations pivotal to later caste functions. Initially, though, activated divergence turned violently competitive as populations inevitably swelled while finite habitable land dwindled. This genetic fragmentation steadily deepened beyond simple tribal rivalry inflicted by ecological pressures, metastasizing into festering, brutal antagonism ignited by the scarce necessities' increasing desperation. The Montau dawned, an abyssal epic of relentless, escalating interspecies genocide amongst Taucan themselves, where tribe warred against radically different tribe, not merely for territory or historical grievance now, but for vital arable silt, sustainable clean geothermal vents centrally connecting strained brood nurseries, essential metal salt deposits. Surviving this entailed utilizing increasingly terrifying levels of slaughtercraft. Disease seeded deliberately ravaged the increasingly dense urban fortress clusters. Horrific novel viral agents fashioned by proto-academics looted from knowledge stores captured after razed symbolic libraries. Starvation became the other apex predator systematically stalking populations. Faction defenders systematically poisoned rival valley waterable aquifers or burned shoreline fisheries, thought crucial competitor protein sources. The proto-skeletal underpinnings of later celebrated Tau technological progression were forged hideously back then. Hideous sonic disruptors designed to liquefy the internal organs of gliders seeking aerial traversal above strategic passes. Nerviga's grenade scaled to penetrate sealed subterranean commands, controlling vital agricultural machinery, sharply different than spaceborne gravitic drives, but spiritually similar. Oral legends preserved solemnly amongst highly disciplined generations of water-caste diplomats charged with negotiating convivial interstellar discourse tell faded tales, reduced now to archetypal caution of fortress cities, falling in final terrible conflagrations reaching volcanic ferocity. Entire bloodline lineages methodically expunged, like unwanted vermin below piles of ornate ancestor tablets deliberately smashed. Ceasefires violated minutes after tribal symbols painted onto fragile parchments. Atrocities so profoundly self-loathing that scholars from disciplines biologically incapable of cynical calculation still instinctually avoided explicit recounting within survival templates. Even archival perfectionists like Torrentus struggled to reconstruct cohesive narrative threads from disguised mythological fragments. All objective gathered analysis confirmed the species stood collectively upon the dripping brink of utter self-annihilation, terrifying potential igniting like unstable warp core plasma, only to near-explosive chain reaction, collapse beneath impossible exponentially escalating reciprocal atrocity chains inflicted upon themselves. This grim trajectory peaked most catapultimically on desolate salt flats that were ancient war zone proving grounds near a fortress metropolis known later, amidst adamantium-preserved chronicles, as Phaton, one of the stubborn last remaining redoubts deep within historically unified builder, cast heartland territories. Clone-nibbled and culture-red lab, enhanced warriors spewed forth systematically by surgically perfected planes castes desperate to obliterate genetic identities, judged deviationism manifest, were hammering constantly ferociously at the weakening outer macrovoid shields projected by increasingly strained Cantrelli devices that were crude earlier Earth caste constructs. For 5 extended Tau solar cycles, brutally long even relative to season guard temporal tracking, circumlocuted as the siege ground bones into visceral dust on both sides, warriors clad in salvaged sheet metal armor plates roaring archaic curses, pounding against impermeable molecular alloy, gate towers with desperation manifest as pure kinetic fury. Within the massive fortified bastion walls, symphonizing groans from infrastructure stressed unto near fracture, suppressed environmental systems struggled to prevent dense plague spores spreading rapidly through damp, crowded subterranean refugee corridors constructed under previous escalation cycles. Nutrient paste dispensers designed for thriving populations dispensed near-starvation soup-thick sludge slowly killing weaker citizens, deliberately deprived even elemental access tools for hunting tried, and failed Avarian mathematical projections, calculating accumulated resource depletion versus population survival timelines, painted failing trajectories in damning cores. The grimly resigned defenders knew mutely, revealing nothing allowed to wearied, recruits entirely too young, clutching Gravwinch comically oversized weapons. They had danced persistent time theft for decades impossible, but final collapse loomed imminent on the horizon. Their end approached as darkness inevitably swallows any horizon-locked light source, where the known universe via physics provides no avenue escape. Inexplicably then, history across detailed multiple Tau cast archives signals understanding that something outside normative material precedence occurred, coinciding precision timer accuracy during deep twilight settling across devastated siege fields outside Phaton. A Tau possessing uniquely unblended features, eerily exceeding any hybrid blend previously witnessed by exhausted lookouts, emerged with unnatural grace into the swirling cordon of fierce sentinels monitoring tightening encirclement. Rather than initiate reflexive annihilation, warriors holding battered pathcutters, radiating killing intent, inexplicably felt gripped by unutterable instinct. They compulsively escorted this radiating, strangely tranquil individual bearing no armor, no visible weaponry beyond soul pressure radiating, visibly somehow immediately bypassing caste loyalty protocols, direct tented command, amongst fortified plains caste warlords, actively brewing assault coordinates, tracking vulnerable subsurface defensive generator nodes. Precisely simultaneously within Phaton came an event equally impossible, bypassing kilometer deep, voids dense with interlocking defense grids millennia, advanced for that era without security triad breaches, logged past millenniate fences, instantly rendering threats inert across entire command spire, the very exact duplicated figure, possessing identical unsettling physiognomy, manifested silently unassuming within the innermost sacrosanct command center sanctum itself, approaching visibly. Terminal builder elders gnawing scarce protein bars, requesting instantaneous sensitive audience vital, simultaneous bearings secured, hesitant chieftains guided, compelled harboring grim unease. By demoralizing solar dawn crossing gravel swathes, littered broken siege engines grinding atmosphere filters dense with ash, air ionized detonation recoil acidity, overlapping ancient friendships broken so long ago context forgot. Phaton's colossal blood-rusted gates, sealed generationally in terrified suspicion across entire Montau epoch, cycled sequentially under silent auspice unprecedented since initial construction millennia. Amongst confused commanders hardening their hearts against planned sabotage trickery, many commanders witnessed legends asserting sudden surrender. Instead came forth selected sanguine commanders, ranked highest honor award status bearers. Gruff Plains tribe paramount generals, resplendent carefully rusted sigils, implying genocidal accomplishments, proudly displayed insignia bearing ritual ironmongery, improvised helmets bearing paired horns hewn from conquered foes. Impossible temporary truce emissaries met tentatively within stately cavern forward positions, peppered by previous artillery, Lowe's carefully previously targeted intentionally, debris-cratered, now purposefully designated neutral mortal zone, by some prior signal unseen, by acceptably ranked enemies. They were brought simultaneously into acknowledgement under the light, ascending the twin local singular stellar bodies, casting long poignant shadows, stretching toward tentative understanding remaining, could perhaps emerge someday anew. Mysterious duplicated figures identifying themselves meaning, those bringing harmony, translated by scholars of En Voix linguistic cadence shifts several millennia hence, the Ethereals guided proceedings, initially suspicious at bay with palpable calm. Standing amidst devastation that even hardened warfarers avoided stepping upon that morning, bereft swordsong dull echoes for perhaps establishment moment of species inception occurring, the Ethereals spoke softly concepts unimaginable during victory or death cycles, suffocating 30 generations under agonizing Montau paradox. They wove verbal consonant thread narratives fundamental, spoke elocution patterns about unified interconnected structures, eclipsing tribe relationships entirely. The foundational philosophies known later disseminated exhaustively among Endeavor colonies, as Tava the embedding idealizing societal scaffolding, called greater good showed shimmering shape, in mind scarce grasping symbolism, beyond cunning war signals applied historically. They outlined rationales where each distinct tribe-stage structure harnessed innate segregation into coordinated embodiment complement, not destroy mutually. Hunters transitional crucial tactical specialists adapted forever defensive roles evolution, perfected millennia without factional subterfuge. The coastal trader lineage's masters stabilization protocols evolved beyond molecular item, debating tax exemptions, interstellar exchange reliability, standards burden rendering. Gliding mountain nomads finally imagined scouting battlefield, flanking, orbits no contradictions before motivated insurrection. Monk architics granted disciplines, so rigorous millennia, sustaining infrastructure, forging galactic empire preservation, ethos, primary, task above self-service constructing systems, enduring cultures, beyond alone ethic collapsing. Salvation form needed nothing sanguinary clause, demanding survival condition compromise. This process moderated manifestation, simultaneously instantiated coagulation, combating infinite seeding conflict fractious inheritance, marked the death agony convulsion of Ian Deep Monto insanity unwinding, seams joining bones together. The welfare of the many would always outweigh the desires of the few. In the span of a single day, a conflict that had raged for generations simply ceased. More Ethereals appeared across the planet, each carrying the same message, each exuding the same inexplicable authority that compelled others to listen and obey. Within a tow year, the wars that had nearly destroyed their species were over. The Montau had ended and a new era had begun. Under the guidance of the Ethereals, Tau society was completely restructured. The subspecies that had once been divided by geography and hatred were reorganized into 5 castes, each with a specific role to play in their new unified society. The hunters of the plains became the fire caste, the warriors and protectors of the Tau. Their aggression, once directed at their own kind, was now channeled toward external threats and later the expansion of the empire. The builders and farmers formed the earth caste. Engineers, artisans, and laborers, who would create the infrastructure and technology upon which Tau civilization would be built. The traders and coastal dwellers became the water caste. Diplomats, merchants, and administrators who would manage the internal affairs of their society and eventually their relations with other species. Those with hollow bones who once glided on mountain winds became the air caste. Messengers at first and later pilots and voidfirers who would carry the Tau beyond their home world. Above all these stood the Ethereals, the smallest caste numerically but unquestioned in their authority and wisdom. From their guidance came not only peace but unprecedented technological advancement. Within a few generations, the Tau progressed from a pre-industrial society to one that had mastered electricity, combustion engines, flight, and eventually space travel. This rapid development did not go unnoticed forever. As the Tower began to explore nearby star systems, they inevitably encountered other species. Some, like the CR root, would become allies integrated into the expanding Tau Empire. Others, like the Orcs, would become implacable enemies against whom the Fire Caste would prove their valor, and eventually they would encounter the vast sprawling domain of humanity, the Imperium of Man. Unlike many species who first encountered the Imperium, the Toa did not immediately find themselves on the receiving end of its fury. Their initial contacts were with fringe elements, rogue traders, frontier worlds, and human settlements far from Imperial oversight. The Water Caste, true to their function, approached these encounters diplomatically, offering trade and technological exchange rather than conquest. For decades, the Tower expanded their influence through such soft power, establishing trade relations with human colonies along what would later be called the Damocles Gulf. The technologies they offered, cleaner power sources, more efficient agricultural methods, medical advances, were eagerly embraced by frontier worlds often neglected by the Imperium's vast bureaucracy. Only when these worlds began to formally secede from imperial rule, pledging themselves to the Tau Empire and the greater good, did the Imperium take full notice of this emerging threat on its eastern fringe. The incredible unity of purpose displayed by the Tau continues to baffle imperial observers. While the Imperium must often resort to fear, religious zeal, or outright force to compel compliance from its citizens, the Tau appear to embrace their roles within society with genuine dedication. A fire warrior fights not primarily for personal glory, but for the greater good. An Earthcast engineer labors tirelessly on new technologies, not for individual recognition, but to advance their species as a whole. Many Imperial scholars attribute this unusual social cohesion to some form of mind control exercised by the Ethereals. They point to the strange organ visible in the center of an Ethereal's forehead, a smaller version of which appears in other Tau castes, and suggest it may produce pheromones or some other biochemical agent that ensures compliance. The Tower themselves dismiss such theories as the paranoid projections of a species that cannot comprehend genuine unity of purpose. To them, the guidance of the Ethereals is accepted through rational understanding of the greater good rather than music, coercion. Whatever the truth may be, one fact remains indisputable. In the span of time that represents barely a footnote in human history, the Tau have transformed from stone-wielding primitives to a starving empire that now challenges the Imperium for control of the eastern fringe. Their technology, while still limited in some respects, particularly their lack of warp travel capability, advances at a pace that alarms Imperial tacticians. Their society, while small compared to the vast Imperium, displays a cohesion and sense of purpose that humanity has not known since perhaps the earliest days of the Emperor's Great Crusade. The origins of the Ethereal caste remain one of the galaxy's most compelling mysteries. Even the most extensive Tower historical records begin with their appearance, not their creation. It is as if they emerged fully formed from the swirling mists of their world's darkest hour. The most sacred Tau texts speak only of those whose time had come, offering poetry rather than explanation. Physically, the Ethereals differ from other Tau in subtle ways. The diamond-shaped bony ridge on their foreheads houses an organ not found in the same form in other castes. While all Tau possess a smaller version of this organ, in Ethereals it is more pronounced and appears to serve functions beyond those observed in their kin. Their bodies tend to be more symmetrical, their movements more precise, their voices possessing harmonics that even other Tau find difficult to describe. Perhaps the most remarkable physical trait of the Ethereals, however, is their longevity. While a typical Tower may live 70 or 80 years, Ethereals have been documented to reach ages of 150 or even 200 years. Though such figures are rare and highly revered, this extended lifespan allows the accumulated wisdom of generations to reside within a single individual, providing stability and continuity to a rapidly evolving society. There is a question that Imperial researchers continually ask: how do the Ethereals maintain their unquestioned authority? A fire warrior will lay down his life without hesitation at an Ethereal's word. An Earthcast engineer will labor without rest if an Ethereal deems the work necessary. Even the most accomplished Tau will abandon deeply held convictions if an Ethereal counsels against them. As I've mentioned, some Imperial scholars attribute this influence to biochemical manipulation, pheromones emitted by that distinctive forehead organ that render other Tau pliant and suggestible. Others suggest a form of psychic domination, though the Tau as a species display virtually no psychic potential otherwise. Still others propose technological means, microscopic implants, or conditioning techniques beyond Imperial understanding. The Tau themselves offer a simpler, though perhaps no less mysterious explanation. The Ethereals are simply right. Their wisdom, their vision, their understanding of what advances the greater good is so profound that to witness it is to recognize its truth. A Watercast diplomat once explained it to an Imperial interrogator. You ask why we follow the Ethereals without question. Have you ever stood in the presence of absolute certainty? Have you ever heard words so perfectly aligned with truth that doubt becomes not just unnecessary but unthinkable? Whatever the mechanism of their influence, the results are undeniable. Under ethereal guidance, Tau society functions with a harmony and purpose that humans can scarcely imagine. Resources are allocated with remarkable efficiency. Technologies develop at an astonishing pace. Conflicts between castes are rare and swiftly resolved. Even integration of alien species proceeds with minimal friction as the greater good expands to encompass new perspectives and abilities. The highest authority among the Ethereals rests with the Council of the Highest, more commonly known as the Ethereal High Council. This body consists of the most senior Ethereals led by a presiding officer known as the Ethereal Supreme or AO. The current holder of this title, Anva, is among the oldest living Toho. His wisdom considered virtually infallible by his people. The High Council is based on the Toho home world from which it issues edicts and guidance to Ethereals stationed throughout the Empire. These instructions flow outward along efficient communication channels, ensuring that even the most distant colonies maintain cultural and philosophical alignment with the core worlds. Individual Ethereals serve at various levels of Tower society. The most junior oversees settlements and communities, while more experienced members guide entire septs, fully developed star systems that form the building blocks of the Tau Empire. At each level, the Ethereals' role combines spiritual guidance, political leadership, and strategic direction. Perhaps the most telling insight into the Ethereals' methods comes from observing how they interact with their own people. They rarely issue direct commands, preferring instead to ask questions that lead the listener toward the desired conclusion. They speak not of obedience, but of clarity, helping each tower see their place within the greater pattern. When they do exercise their authority directly, it is with a gentle firmness that brooks no argument, yet leaves the subject feeling enlightened rather than coerced. This more subtle approach extends to how Ethereals manage the different castes. With the aggressive Fire caste, they temper martial ardor with strategic patience. With the pragmatic Earth caste, they inspire innovation while maintaining focus on practical needs. With the diplomatic Water caste, they refine the message of the greater good for different audiences. With the Air caste, they balance the isolation of void service with reminders of connection to the greater whole. In battle, an Ethereal's presence transforms the performance of Tau warriors. Fire caste soldiers fight with greater discipline and purpose when an Ethereal stands with them, seeming to transcend their normal physical limitations. Some observers report witnessing Tau continuing to fight despite injuries that should have incapacitated them, driven by the simple presence of their spiritual leaders. The flip side of this phenomenon reveals perhaps the only weakness in the seemingly perfect Toho social structure. When an Ethereal falls in battle, nearby Tau often experience profound psychological shock. Fire warriors tend to become disoriented, even temporarily paralyzed by grief. Alternatively, they may fly into a cold rage, advancing with reckless abandon to avenge their fallen leader. For this reason, Ethereals in combat zones are typically accompanied by honor guards of veteran fire warriors who have foregone the traditional path to command in favor of protecting these irreplaceable leaders. They will willingly sacrifice themselves in an effort to save their leader. The mystery of the Ethereals, their origins, their methods, their true nature, all remain unsolved despite decades of Imperial research and interrogation. Captured Ethereals reveal little, maintaining the same serene composure, whether facing gentle questioning or harsh Imperial methods. Autopsies of deceased specimens have identified the unusual organ in their foreheads, but have failed to determine its function. Even so, with this leadership, their technology advances at an alarming pace. Their society functions with an efficiency that puts human worlds to shame. Their message of the greater good continues to seduce human populations on frontier worlds, offering a vision of purpose and progress that the grinding bureaucracy of the Imperium cannot match. Perhaps most disturbing of all to Imperial observers is the genuine contentment evident among the Tau. They do not serve their Ethereals out of fear or blind obedience, but with a willing dedication born of absolute belief in their shared purpose. In a galaxy where most species are locked in desperate struggles for survival, the Tau move forward with confidence and hope, guided by mysterious leaders who appeared as if by design at exactly the moment they were needed most. The first whispers of the Tau among Imperial worlds came as gentle breezes rather than howling gales. Subtle influences flowing across the eastern fringe, carrying new ideas and unfamiliar goods to human settlements long neglected by their own kind. For decades, the Tau watercast had moved quietly among the frontier worlds that bordered their growing empire, offering friendship, technology, and prosperity to populations who had known little of these things under Imperial rule. These early encounters bore little resemblance to the stark exception to humanity's grim history of violent first contact, stained the stars like a sudden bloom of improbable color amidst gray desolation. Where alien encounters typically meant raids, massacres, and chains, the watercast offered starkly divergent wares. Intricate trade agreements, unfathomable technological exchanges, and diplomats whose voices carried the exact cadence and nuance of High Gothic. They weren't simply translators, they were meticulous anthropologists who had dissected, absorbed, and mastered human custom and history, arriving upon each beleaguered Imperial fringe world bearing gifts tailored precisely to its bleeding wounds. To the gaunt farmer on collapsing agromoons, they presented genetically refined seed strains resistant to blight and drought, coupled with irrigation systems that coaxed life from near-dead earth. For miners coughing their ruined lungs into rag-covered hands, deep in poisonous shafts lit only by flickering looming globes, they brought atmospheric scrubbers, reinforced pit props, and somatic therapies capable of halting the rot-consuming breath itself. For planetary governors crushed beneath the leaden weight of imperial tithes, their whispers suggested alternative trade routes, prosperous exchanges with neighboring burgeoning Tau settlements offering high-value goods outside Munitorum ledgers. It was against this backdrop of bestowed hope, of tangible relief breathed into lives starved of it, that the watercast diplomats began to weave another discourse murmurs of a greater collective good, a society structured not on oppression and tithe, but on contribution according to capability and receipt according to fundamental need, their words naturally sliding into minds already softened by deliverance. This subtle sedition unfurled beyond the notice of the Imperium itself, that vast and ponderous galactic leviathan preoccupied with 1,000 raging fires. The eastern fringe was, after all, always troublesome, a backwater perpetually plagued by the warp serpentine storms, orc speartips tearing clumsy wounds across subsectors, and the inevitable, squalid flare-ups of human spirits broken by desperation. A scattering of reports detailing exotic trinkets traded on dusty frontier hubs, or whispers of unorthodox philosophies, unsettling the occasional crusty pioneer settlement, barely registered amidst the roaring clamor of genestealer cults erupting, demonic incursions bleeding into reality, and the ceaseless, grinding warfare that defined an empire locked in permanent siege. Only in the year 742 of the 41st millennium, when an entire constellation of imperial worlds girding the Damocles Gulf hardened their newfound convictions and formally ripped their allegiance from Holy Terra, pledging fealty instead to the nascent Tau Empire, did the slumbering giant truly jolt awake to the insidious cancer flowering on its distant frontier. Its response, when it finally came, was steeped in the expected, brutal catharsis of its spite. Cardinal Isogurni, his vox-hailers echoing with righteous fury from the stern world of Brimlock, ignited the pious fervor, demanding a holy crusade to scourge the Xenos contagion with blessed fire. the Administratum, stung by the disgrace of Imperial territory, willingly surrendering to aliens previously catalogued as inconsequential irritants, endorsed his call with an efficiency alien to its normally glacial processes. Thus was the Damocles Gulf Crusade forged a colossal, grinding fist of Imperial retribution. A dozen capital ships like floating mountain ranges plated in adamantium, bolstered by grim detachments from several revered Space Marine chapters, and nearly 20 regiments of hardened Imperial Guard, half a score of those grim fighters hailing from Brimlock itself, eager for vengeance against those who fled their collective hearth. For the Tau, whose previous encounters with humanity had been mere skirmishes, probing engagements like sparks against flint, the sheer overwhelming force crashing towards them must have resonated with the kind of awe that chills the blood. Yet, the battlefield echoed not with panic or the chaotic cacophony of a species broken by terror at the sight of human might. Instead, they met the hurricane bearing down upon them with a chilling, coordinated exhalation, a meticulously orchestrated defense born of calculated preparation, and a tactical sophistication deployed with unnerving serenity. The first true clash erupted amidst the silent vacuum of the uninhabited Haida system. 7 angular Tau vessels, each a nimble silhouette against starlight, swam to intercept a ponderously vast Imperial flotilla. Refusing to cede the void to superior numbers, the sleek ship spat deadly torpedo salvos carved from concentrated light and exotic matter across distances that beggared human targeting doctrines, fracturing the Imperial fleet's carefully arranged formation before its devastating broadsides could even cycle to firing positions. A lethal ballet ensued, a dance of capital ship maneuvers and countermaneuvers etched across the ink of space, laying bare the novel contours of Tau fleet warfare. Lacking the colossal, bone-checking broadsides of Imperial dreadnoughts, they compensated with devastatingly accurate long-range weaponry and feral squadrons of agile escort craft, boiling like angry hornets from their motherships, launch bays. Ultimately limping away having lost a single cruiser, but painting the pristine void metal flanks of Imperial ships with molten scars, the Tau conducted a disciplined withdrawal. They detasted the beast's strength and drawn bitter, vital data regarding its might. The war descended planetside with bone-crushing force on Skell, a world scarred by agriculture, home to roughly 7 million Tau souls and their human allies. The Iron Hand Space Marine chapter spearheaded the brutal reality of landing, their black armored forms storming an orbital station carved into their initial foothold. Ground Commander Captain Rumman, surveying the pastoral world from orbit, anticipated a swift, cleansing purge against tribal remnants barely scraping together primitive weaponry. Instead, the Imperial boots met not ancient spears, but a disciplined, brilliantly equipped Tau defense. Fire warriors encased in eerily agile battlesuits moved with catwalk precision, laying down laser-straight rivers of pulse fire in overlapping, murderous grids. Their hammerhead tanks, seemingly delicate compared to the brutal bulk of Lemon Russes, proved terrifyingly potent. Railgun slugs screamed through ceramite armor plating as if it were plaster, shattering hulls with the brute physics of hypervelocity penetrators that disbelieving Imperial veterans spat blood and curses at. Only the desperate, swift intervention by sizzling Tempestus-Scion squads and the unstoppable juggernaut charge of assault marines prevented a wholesale slaughter when teams of Tau crisis suits erupted from camouflaged positions to ambush the advancing 17th Brimlock Dragoons amid Skell's rolling, fertile hills. Yet, despite these jarring initial defeats, the sheer, grinding weight of Imperial numbers ground forward inexorably, like a glacier carving stone. Advancing towards the planet's major population centers, the crusading forces encountered chilling evidence of Tau forethought. The elite artisans, the master scientists, the essential technicians all evacuated into the depths of space, the most precious technologies systematically scoured away or utterly vaporized in sophisticated self-destruct protocols rather than fall into grasping Imperial hands. When the exhausted 9th Brimlock Fusiliers at last planted their tattered regimental banners in Skell's administrative heart, they conquered dust and silence a hollow prize, a carcass meticulously picked clean of its vital organs. Momentum, fueled by wrath and inertia alone, propelled the crusade next to the frozen tombworld of Visel, home to isolated Tau fishing colonies clinging like delicate frost flowers to the ice caps. Deeming the prize too meager and the resistance too light to warrant wasting precious ground troops in the vicious cold, the fleet masters shrugged, unleashing a casual tsunami of orbital bombardment. Plasma beams converted millennium glaciers into roaring cataracts in seconds, boiling seas of slurry engulfing the fragile habitats. A swift, precise, utterly merciless deletion that stood in stark, sickening contrast to the Tau's calculated rescue of their skilled populace mere worlds away. 5 grinding months later, traversing the treacherous immensity of the Gulf, the Imperial juggernaut arrived at Daleth, a vital, pulsating heartworld of the fledgling Tau Empire. Here, ambition met reality, forged into a masterwork of stellar defense. Gone were isolated defenses. The Imperials breached a meticulously constructed killing field sheathing the entire system, layered like an onion forged by demon engineers, the outermost layer clinging to the barren fortress moon of Prion. A faint echo of overconfidence, carried from earlier Pyrrhic successes on Skell, hazed the Imperial fleet as it probed towards Prion's orbital bastion. The price for insufficient caution arrived instantly in a stinging volley fired not from chaos, but uncannily precise calculation. Tau railguns mounted deep within the station's shielded core erupted. The first screaming salvo gutted the imposing honor of Damless, her great decks venting atmosphere in icy plumes. Simultaneously, a previously concealed Tau fleet, nestled like lurking predators within Prion's sensor shadow, surged forward with silent menace. While stunned commanders struggled to reform shattered lines amidst the roaring carnage, a colossal artifact, the immense engineering marvel of a Tau gravitic pulse spire, manifested suddenly within the fray, its massive bulk turning its void-rending energies, with terrifying deliberation, towards the defenseless troop convoys. Had it not been for Gunnery Master Jalek, aboard the monolithic Blade of Woe, whose veteran instincts propelled the ancient Retribution-class battleship directly into the fire path, the Crusade's ground forces would have dissolved into atoms. The Blade's crippling lance salvos tore into the gravitic sphere before the crucial shot could coalesce, shredding the colossal vessel into a silent constellation of superheated debris. Yet the cost of this impulsive, furious save echoed bitterly. The void spat wreckage from multiple gutted capital ships and a dozen escorts, ragged metal tombs tumbling against the awful darkness. The Tau's masterstroke, meticulously conceived, had teetered agonizingly close to total annihilation of the human fleet. Crushed beneath the weight this salvation demanded, the remnants of the invasion force finally clawed surface purchase on Daleth Prime itself, establishing a landfall along the rugged coastline of the largest continent. Shielded deep in the east by the sea's chill embrace and anchored north by formidable mountain barriers resembling the teeth of a colossal beast, the surviving forces formed a spearpoint of titans and armored regiments, grinding inexorably southwest towards the shimmering coastal hub cities of the Tau. It was a hammer brought to crack a delicate shell. Imperial confidence, bruised but resolute, surged forward. Yet the initial thrust dissolved into a gray nightmare of attrition the moment the Imperial wedge pushed beyond the immediate beachhead. The rolling terrain became a killing ground orchestrated by an unseen conductor. Smart missiles streaked lethally precise death from concealed positions beyond hills and dense bioengineered forests, atomizing entire platoons. Companies detached to hunt the spotters vanished instead, ambushed by packs of Tau Pathfinder jump troops materializing from the very air, their sophisticated photon camouflage flickering only as their pulse rifles spat blue death. Piece by piece, the disciplined Imperial blitzkrieg fractured under this relentless pressure, splitting into three fraying spearheads, each increasingly vulnerable to swift, coordinated blitz strikes from the defenders they sought to trap. The first spearhead, scraping the flank of the Forbidding Mountains, comprised the nay-unstoppable biomechanical gods of war from Legio Thanataris. Their stomping advance met a sobering riposte. Previously thought to be merely long-range space-deployable weapons platforms, the armored jaws of Daleth Prime gaped open. From cavernous subterranean silos emerged squadrons of colossal Tau Manta missile destroyers, skimming with impossible grace and terrible intent straight for the advancing god machines, proving their horrifying dual capability as atmosphere-reborn instruments of apocalypse. The second thrust, driving spearheads comprised of the wily jungle veterans of the Rakeshan rifles, plunged into the planned Arcologipolis of Galbrin, expecting hab blocks to clear like pinned beetles. Instead, the very Ferrocrete and Plasteel came alive, disgorging tides of Kroot carnivore clans howling with visceral fury, their alien metabolism and genetic savagery making them shock troops unparalleled in the meatgrinder of close-quarters urban slaughter. The third, born by the genetic supermen of the Space Marine clan's stoic Iron Hands, relentless Ultramarines, grim exorcists seeking to blunt the Tau counterpunch, encountered the ultimate pinnacle of Tau military science. Battlesuit teams housing the Firecast elite in experimental XV-8 armor packs, blasters crackling with unbelievable energy, and maneuvering thrusters screaming defiance as they matched the Adeptus Astartes blow for Biotice-enhanced blow. This coordinated triad of alarming counterattacks, simultaneously unleashed like wrathful claws, slammed the Imperial war machine's momentum to a dead, juddering halt. The lines locked like rusted gears, bleeding across a muddy Noman's land scarred by the sucking trenches radiating 20 kilometers north of Galbrin. Victory became a stale commodity measured in inches clawed from corpse-churned mud, only to be surrendered overnight. Attrition became the crushing doctrine as Imperial infantry dug their deep trenches, seeking refuge from the punishing Tau railgun and missile fire, emerging only to endure nightly horror. Silent deathmarks sculpted marksmen, materializing within killing distance under the cover of superior Tau optics, pathfinders flitting wraith-like to carve isolated listening posts into ruin. Each dawn illuminated more crimson sept icons emblazoned on reinforced drop capsuling landing beyond Imperial lines. The reinforcements General Wendell Gouge critically lacked were arriving daily for his enemies, draining the sap from the human forces. Gouge's assessment fell like a heavy stone upon Imperial command spas. The Crusade, by desperate accident rather than design, had stumbled upon the Tau's demographic and industrial heartland utterly unprepared. Reinforcements promised by distant segmentum lords remained mythic whispers carried on damaged astropath channels. Another month, Gouge realized with cold dread, painting blue circles steadily encroaching on his holographic map, and his entire expeditionary force would be drowning in Tau reinforcements. Inside the command vaults deep beneath the earth, chaos mirrored the battlefield above. Inquisitor Grand of the Ordo Zeno spat doctrine like venom, demanding immediate withdrawal followed by the ultimate sanction. The cleansing fires of Exterminatus, her incantatory fervor echoing arguments that this adaptable, resilient Xenos race posed an insidious, adaptive threat the Imperium could ill contain, let alone tolerate to exist. Others resisted this grim nihilism, voices finding weight notably among the Stoic Space Marine chapters, who'd faced the Tau line to line, acknowledging the enemy fought with disciplined purpose according their own alien tenets of war, embodying martial prowess deserving acknowledgement, even devoid of the Emperor's sacred aura. Paralysis held the command structure hostage, while the front lines hemorrhaged under Gouge's immediate command. Seeing mercy absent from Scroll or Vox, the general acted decisively with diminishing assets. He amassed his weary titans and numbed Brimlock regulars into one desperate strike force to smash northward, aiming the spearhead obliquely along the coast, hoping to crush the Tau coastal flank, pinning their main strength against the continent's southeastern sea. The charge itself unfolded with grim momentum born of nothing left to lose. Titans crumbled defensive structures blessed by XV-8 teams futile in trying hold monster-class automata, guard infantry pressing battered brigades, supported by punishing chimera volleys. The assault captured Shirnal, a town, straddling a vital reinforced suspension bridge, crawling across the muddy crease of the River Shan. For 20 agonizing hours bleeding into endless gray day and night, victory shimmered like a mirage. The Tau looked snared between an unstoppable iron push and the vast black sheet of the sea itself. Destruction seemed within grasp, but by the next dawn the mirage vanished entirely. Where disciplined cordons should have fallen, only torn soil and running footprints remained leading south under the sickly sun. Like unpuzzled shadows retreating before light, the core Tau defenders had overnight melted southwards in a brilliant fighting withdrawal executed with astonishing precision. The new defensive perimeter lay several kilometers beyond Galbrin's fractured skyline. Worse, appearing abandoned entirely, was Galbrin itself. Only feral cadres of Kroot and stealth suit teams emerged momentarily to unleash savage, harassing assaults on the bewildered vanguard Imperial patrols, cautiously probing the suddenly silent city's edges. Their real target emerged clearly, the vast, miraculously intact starport complex sprawling beyond Galbrin's western edge, seized and converted hastily into an enigmatic transit hub, its landing pads crawling silently between greenlit Tau transport ships. This sudden, breathtaking withdrawal deposited upon General Gouge's conscience both a mirage of escape and crushing dilemma written in iron and shame. Tangibly laid before him was the opportunity an outstandingly equipped port facility offering dignified, organized extraction from this planetary anathema, bleeding good soldiers by the hour. More subtly, the sheer depth of the Tau pullback signaled a readiness, perhaps even a quiet expectation, to permit such a retreat without unleashing the pursuit that typically celebrates the routing of any Imperial foe. Yet to withdraw now was to accept defeat etched permanently across the Crusade's fractured soul, admitting failure in the primary decree of reholding worlds that bent to alien sway and extracting retribution upon any creature daring pollute the sanctity of human domain. It demanded impossible calculation, honor the Crusade oath, and risk his remnant force crushed in a hopeless siege against mounting blue tides. Or condemn his army's salvation by withdrawing and shattering his name forever across courts martial requiring martyrs to justify costly failure. Gouge stood at the precipice of historical damnation, whatever his choice. Yet neither shameful retreat nor suicidal persistence remained his sole option. Fate, inevitably in a galaxy so unforgiving, intervened arbitrarily. An express psychic condemnation screeched directly onto his internal cranial vox circuit. Inquisitor Sendal Cryptman of the Sacred Ordo, Xenos, a name forged in fearful whispers ordering the immediate return of all remaining Crusade assets to Brimlock. Absolutely no explanation was offered. The terror simmering beneath the orders was conveyed solely through sheer proximity killer urgency and the absolute, unchallengable authority of an Inquisitor given breath by the Divine Throne. Argument melted under that terrifying frost. The Crusade ceased abruptly, unfinished, permanently scarred by mission objectives unredeemed, long before achieving final victory or manifest capture. In a breathtaking shift seemingly divorced from millennia of xenophobic religious fury, emissaries representing the no-withdrawing Imperial forces encountered Tau diplomats beneath complex sigils of truce over the ruins of war. Negotiated under grim observation from both warrior castes respectively, the Tau proved brutally pragmatic. Interfering with departure solved nothing except further bloodletting onto scorched lands already saturated with sacrifice. The Fists knew strategically the Imperium had lost faith in its own attack. Rationality dictated securing liberation, to instead secure assets from annihilation, else enacted on torment, eternally staining the system. Fire warriors stood impassive armor post on deactivated wrecked vehicles' riverbanks as guard regiments marched onto dusty grounded transports, their disciplined silence vibrating with unconcealed contempt polished like armor. Only the crude curses or fists hurled by more zealous guardsmen seeking vengeance in impotence fractured the dignity. Equally mute, impassive blue ceramic heads turned, those cold, unmoving lenses conveying an unspoken understanding of unavoidable continuance amidst cyclical conflict long before prayers ended. Later investigation unsealed the apocalyptic truth, motivating Cryptman's inexplicable withdrawal order from countless light years distant. Gigantic organic fenestrated forms like colossal bleeding constellations, silently manifolded a corridor of hanging death-weaving warp wakes, unseen, approaching Imperial space from unstoppable deep void shadows were sighted. Hive Fleet Behemoth had cracked galactic barrier contact zones, its infinite claws beginning long century stretches towards populated collection worlds, premising an invasion species predicated on absolute genocide. Against such chitinous, consuming eternity, even highly advanced adaptable nations seemed barely fragments awaiting the vacuum zifter. The Tyranids' unimaginable devourers had arrived as unstoppable doom incarnate. Humanity found its attention wrenched violently away from border squabbles towards understanding extinction, had hitherto unrecognizably birthed its nightmarish countenance. For the Empire of Tau, despite holding the Geist, started blazing its covenant in the fires of Damocles' crusade. The confrontation burned as simultaneously colossal shock and foundational philosophical crucible brilliant enough sear perception. They endured barely tested previously upon such scale, all-focused fury humanity could muster. Space Marine demigods deployed en masse. Impossible war engines dwarfing landscapes, grinding structures, fragment incredible relentless apocalypse unleashed. Achieving little quantifiable conquest, but securing infinitely greater value recognizing it had broken Imperial will sufficiently preventing occupation, narrative becoming unstoppable tide, overwhelming frontier. The Firecast put doctrine against the Emperor's angels, recording minute differences interpreting strategic and tactical principles, confronting assets pushing perfection by brutality itself. Lessons infiltrated every stratum, noting points vulnerability concealment patterns against genetically augmented tactical genius, deploying squad reconfigurations emphasizing dispersion versus overwhelming mass assaults absorbing lesser opponents wherein the Imperium excels. The Earthcast dissected sample projectiles stripping digital impulses buried within fragments of traitor brush plating recovered from killing fields, running foundational simulation progenitors devising stouter composites, tracing bullet propelling harmonics adapting coils redesigning pulse rifle discharges. Converting captured Orcish bioweapons data towards a mission, formally countering Laskan fire protocols, simultaneously improving battlesuit dynamic joint mobility, reducing target acquisitions, sciences perpetually refining weapons, fast approaching desirable thresholds. The Watercast acted as observational scholars lingering near trucelines absorbing notions, truly perceiving untestable human religious factionalist zealotry beyond prior academic abstracts. Understanding how Imperial Guardsmen installed unwavering belief systems, presented psychologically indomitable equipment, conquering impossible unhappy odds. Memorization of preaching noted actions, correlate desire sacrifice martyrdom intelligence, irreplaceable confronting diplomacies, prepared for intractable dedicated enemies, arguing by insurmountable mythical imperatives. Initial diplomatic success became strategy, yet front expanded, inevitably embracing deadly truth, understanding required constant refinement positioning. The Imperium sailed away retracted, bleeding hideously from largely fractured foe, yet experienced the end impressed. Police action escalated beyond calculated limits, proving enormously, embarrassingly costly against minor actor, whose existence demanded restructuring regional dominance models extremely negatively. Imperial archives remembered Daleth not glorious conquest stamping suffering Xenos. Grief-tinged bafflement, interspersed grudging professional notation, citing disciplined adversary, fought consistently honorable within scope, understanding galactic brutality warfare, implies respect differing kinds. Beneath surface narrative acknowledged an embarrassing reprieve forced upon Empire, order focus, desperate, endeavor defensive struggle, new star scourge, possessed devouring potential, forever altering galactic history course. Victory roundly belonged exclusively newborn swarms, relentless universal hunger, unknowable inside spinning galaxies, chariot wheel, spinning silently across immaterial abyssal countless consumed worlds, trailing behind expanding sleepy darkness, contaminating slipspace translucent dark tides, leaving sanity crumble wake. The revelation echoed through the command chambers of the Tiao Empire, resonating not just as tactical intelligence, but as a profound shift in galactic perspective born beneath the smudged skies of Daleth. The flashes of pulse fire, the grinding advance of Imperial armor, the choked final transmissions of water cast emissaries, it all crystallized into a truth the Ethereals confirmed. The terrifying Imperium of Man, that monolithic engine of annihilation looming on their borders, was fractured. It was not a singular, implacable monolith forged from pure hate, but a crumbling statue held together by decaying dogma and conflicting wills. Within its colossal, oppressive shadow, the Tiao had glimpsed nuance. Signs flickered like stars in the void. Imperial commanders, who acknowledged tactical brilliance even from Xeno's opponents, who displayed a warrior's honor in the grim dance of destruction, humans who, bound by oath to a distant, decaying Godemperor, nonetheless harbored quiet doubts about policies seeding only suffering on barren ideological ground. This mosaic, pieced together from desperate battlefield observations and the quiet murmurs of limited contacts on forgotten frontier worlds, became the bedrock for the Tiao's nascent strategy. Not conquest, a fool's errand against such scale. Not annihilation, a tragic waste of potential. Instead, patience, persuasion. The greater good would be offered, a gentle tide washing against the crumbling Imperial bulwark. The water cast, their voices instruments of reason, would work tirelessly on those human worlds, where Imperial rule offered little but fear and indignity, whispering alternatives into receptive ears. The Earthcast would turn their ingenuity not just to war, but to crafting marvels, technologies explicitly designed to spark human desire, proving the tangible benefits of cooperation embedded within the Tiao philosophy. The Firecast, ever-vigilant patinas of ochre, would hold the line for Tiao worlds and allies, shields raised, discipline absolute, but swords would not be drawn recklessly against Imperial might. No more futile charges into the teeth of the storm. On Daleth itself, the air thick with the ozone tang of spent weapons and the psychic residue of retreat, the Ethereals gathered. Below them, the last lumbering Imperial transports clawed their way upward, leaving scorched earth bleeding toxins, stark scars upon the world. They contemplated this ancient, powerful, broken species humanity. So much potential coiled inside them like monstrous, unfurling roots, yet choked by millennia-deep thickets of primal fear and blind hatred. In that moment of withdrawal and contemplation, staring at the damaged vista left by the failed Damocles Gulf crusade, a new resolve solidified. It was more than mere defiance, more than a stubborn refusal to be erased. It became a purpose flickering with tragic grandeur, to offer the Imperium, this wounded beast raging against the stars, not annihilation but redemption. Absolution for its sins, one parched human world, one yearning soul at a time. The stalemate above Daleth wasn't a conclusion. It was merely the first tense step in an intricate, perilous dance stretching far into the void-touched future. Peace, however strategic and temporary, seemed possible, until the rain changed. Generations of Tiao agrarians had welcomed the late autumn rains that blessed their world cities and farms, soft presences nurturing seed pods and filling reservoirs. But in the deep cycle of 899 M41, the rain became an object of dread. It fell not in gentle mists, but in thick, viscous drops that seemed to cling to skin and biosoaker with unnatural persistence, as heavy as guilt and unsettlingly gelatinous. On countless outlying settlements and research enclaves, fire warriors on perimeter patrol wiped the clinging moisture from their optics and dismissed it as an atmospheric anomaly. But the farmers, their connection to their land more intimate and primal, stood under their porous eva coverings and gazed skyward with skins crawling beneath their simple smocks. The rain stank subtly of decay, coppery and alien. The very rhythm of the downpour felt off, a discordant note vibrating in the hollow of the bones. Reports first filtered in as impersonal data bleeps scattered Imperial trade hubs along the vertiginous edges of the Tiao zone of expansion, inexplicably silent, their vox channels drowned in static or chillingly vacant. Hard-pressed tactical command in the Jalilo's prefecture attributed it to warp squall's frequent unwelcome visitors across the stellar region, perhaps opportunistic Imperial raiders taking advantage of recent tensions, a minor piracy flare-up easily contained. Even when the meticulously scheduled deadline for the outbound Brotherhood's routine burst transmission came and went without a single squawk of data or warning buoy flaring to life, the prevailing logic leaned towards catastrophe born of the treacherous immaterium or annihilation by some hitherto unknown hostile voidfarer before they could fire off a ping. The reality, unfolding with nightmare inevitability, was vastly more terrible. A tendril of the all-devouring horror known as the Tyrannid Swarm originating from the ghastly, ancient hive fleet behemoth, very monstrosity, whose galactic arrival over a century prior had forced the frantic ceasefire, ending the Damocles operation against the Tiao head, pierced the veil, and infiltrated their sphere. Labeled coolly and clinically by Mechanicus taxonomists as Hive Fleet Gorgon, this splinter, though initially insubstantial by the gargantuan standards of the greater host, had not slumbered in the void. For decades it had feasted in the forgotten, ill-protected fringes of Imperial dominion, glutting itself on raw biomass, swelling its malevolent strength, mutating constantly in response to every pollutant, toxin, and defense strategy its voracious consciousness encountered. Now it probed the Tiao expansion sphere, a predator honed to terrifying specificity, its capacity for adaptive metamorphosis achieving dizzying new pinnacles even for a species defined by biological malleability. Its arrival crashed upon Tiao awareness not with a shout, but with profound, frigid silence. The orbital picket station, dutifully watching over the verdant agriworld of Shadragus, ceased transmitting mid-stride. Shortly thereafter, frantic, braking signals choked with screams blurted from the orbital plates tethered to Shadragus. Moon's radiance showed impossible blobs occluding stars, billions of biomass identifiers flooding the voidskin. Gargoyles, 10,000 winged nightmares, leathery pinions beating impossible swarms through the freezing dark, hammered into the sleek hulls of the docked repair ships and shipyard structures described. Tiao interceptors, Iriax flyers humming with focused laser fire, sliced through the incoming tide in blinding flash sheets. Carnage unfolded in the vacuum silence, winged corpses shredded like rotten fruit by the concentrated fire. Yet more poured in, more arrived immediately behind, and more after that, wave after wave, uncaring of the attrition. The defending broadsides melted gun barrels, hammerhead batteries overheated and fused. Still the wing tide pressed, an unending storm of chitin wings and dripping talons. Worse, the frantic post-action analyses from the surviving sensor logs became chilling, shared among horrified commanders. The bioforms adapted visibly. Observed respiratory rates altered complex suits mid-swing, subtly thicker epidermal layers developing chitting carapace, refined between approach waves. Resistance increasing exponentially against each new volley of laser fire. A nightmarish counter-revolution raced across generations compressed into minutes. Koro Varoth of the Kelsian Sept fleet broke, the Necron-monikered warp lane, constraints immediately upon receipt of the distress scream from Shadragus. His sleek cruisers punching crippling holes in the harrying clouds of Ripper drones and lurking pyrophene bioships that attempted forming a loose blockade halfway towards Shadragus' gravity field. He managed to insert whole Gladius ground formations, packed aboard specialized Manta insertion craft down through decaying bioplasma clouds, sloughing off dying Tyrannid-sealing organisms, delivering fire warrior cadres reinforced with hammerhead squadrons and crisis suits entrusted to the fierce and driven Shasso Var deployed with grim purpose. The fire warriors landed amid tangled biotic tangles and harmonic jungle groves ringing the planetary base shipyard, establishing fortified havoc zones, whilst lighter stealth cadres and Kroot regiments vanished into the dense lower canopy, shapers echoing challenge cries cutting through humid air. His strategy leveraged the dense topography beautifully coldly. Initial gaunt swarms funneling through specific jungle sectors balling mindlessly, driven by synapse roar, collapsing instantly into cleverly prepared Kroot flanking traps coordinated by Shaper Peachly, whose ferocity became legendary lances and blades rending chitin distancing entire key approaches enforced by ambushing pathfinders and precise pinpoint fire redirects killing bioform clusters. For a desperate time, it stood. Then the Gorgon flexed its terrifying signature function. The next surge of hormagaunts flowed, lithe alien bodies moving low beneath hanging vines and pollen spores startlingly different. Faster, eerily fluid through heavy undergrowth, previously thick terrain briefings labeled impassable even for Kroot. Leg joints reformed subtly. Adrenal gland outputs visibly spiked monitored via drone sweeps, granting terrifying bursts of acceleration through tangles eating Kroot ambush party positions astonishingly effectively. Counters struck viciously, concentrated pulse carbine fire raked through these faster strains, newly developed seeker missile cascades seeded via drone spotter bleeps vaporized clusters deep beneath canopy zones. Chasseau-Var consolidated losses cautiously. It barely mattered. Again, the impossible adaptation. Hour after relentless hour, unfolding hollow projections showed beforeigned after corpses. The third wave gaunts possessed jagged claws, astonishingly thickened and hooked, connected with sensors projecting shocking tensile reconstruction strength evidenced in efficiently tearing aside Kroot established natural fortifications of resilient spine branches, previously arduous barriers. This pattern became the grinding heartbeat of Tiao despair throughout entire conflict phases. Any tactical improvisation switching Barracuda wing ordnance patterns, deploying a newly conceived field network drone adapting jamming frequencies locally timed by Earth-cast technicians, even switching Cadre pulse rifle variants focused towards experimental chemical injections, yielding initial spikes, bioform collapse clusters, got met within diurnal rotations, sometimes mere shifts consistently. Difference noticeable, log signatures stark. Thicker carapace plates, nucleating pellets layered, peculiarly deflecting beam focus melts. Corrupted sensory overexpression, overwhelming frequency leakage tracking drone transmitters. Internal immunosystem redundancies, metabolizing chemical vectors at clinically shocking speeds, neutralizing munitions, effectively requiring completely new toxin formulations, hastily conceived mid-war zone logistics schedules, deploying broadly. Two realities grinding incessant counter-advances. Technological ingenuity versus evolutionary horror, projected via undreamed biological arms race scales, outstripping adaptive warfare timelines almost instantaneously. Each careful solution, pride of the Earth-cast minds carefully iterated, coolly rendered effectively irrelevant precisely moments, achieving battlefield effectiveness triggering cold fury over mediations across crisis conclaves. For Tiao, innovators at the soul's cultural core, witnessing Gorgon's tuning biological purpose adaptation engine proved a uniquely excruciating brand of strategic helplessness, wearing away command structures incrementally. With the Neocom's eager dominion accepted millennia later, once Krath's prime rhombus settled under Biocrawler's chitin force, Supreme Admiral Koravaroth acknowledged defeat grimly. The liner perimeter logistics impossible sustain under constant evolution shock. Signal pips demanding Shadragus be abandoned originated deeply shrouded waves ahead colony space losing vectors. His fleet coalesced near stable jump points, preparing emergency withdrawal despite grasping hands grabbing at precious escape routes closing relentlessly. However, Chasseau-Var refused extraction orders echoing evacuation patterns. His crack hunter cadre corps remaining planet-bound, initiated an audacious, suicidal operation, unfolding tactical wisdoms, acknowledged later doctrine. Eliminate the synapse creatures directing the Meatwave armies toward consuming evolution structures. Specialized fusion blade-equipped suits, stealth generators flickering abused map deep gorge synapse nexus nodes, surgically struck costing 97 percept valuable assets, entire platoons voluntarily consumed charging elevated nesting zones, clustered tyrannid brain analogs dominating tactical scans biology, shrill nerve blasts projecting swarming control. They succeeded against impossible odds, filtered casualty reports honoring names decades respected. After the crackling neural shriek echoed, then suddenly stammered impotent static field chaotic interference across the psychic link shuddering, Gaunt's froze momentarily dumb, lost purpose disorganized Flock's conscience ripped teeming animalistic floundering paralyzed planning locus, annihilated Var's spearhead cleansing clusters, preventing optimal biomass recycling chains established dwelling nodes meager revival, since destroyed high fleet capability planet incomplete victory siphoned metabolic potential. Pyrrhic yet critical learning riveted. Var's almost skeletal formation remnants, then abandoned skyward's observation noting confusion succeeding stopping consolidation, perfect harvesting necessary, for fleet expansion key, obstacle hive fleet strategy noted warp telemetry, devoured corpses regrowing intelligent purpose understood shuttlecraft burning atmosphere, passes inadvertent deliverance. While bitter orbital gases scarred only ash piled visibly from evacuated vital Shadragus low-orbit groupings, securing dispersed Hyperion cluster projection resources, falling sacrificed objective key points defense positions. Horror expanded simultaneously devoured reality, itself moving sectors crucial valuable heavens, beyond counting meticulous zone, designs carefully outlined consensus maps, shredded finding engulfing organic terror, accelerating frightfully within perception boundary, lines the strategically vital colony classified K as orbital anchors held a tempting evacuation system, monitoring protective nebula border namely Calavis, encoded strangely quiet content Lorien Halo resonate signals. Traded differently numerous agreed points precisely classified. Their response became horrifyingly unexpected, displaying visually disturbing divergent engagement vector analysis, originating intraplanetary body designated moon orbiting, Kaya's scientifically classified, inert emitting dormant volcanic patterns millennia passive scans, assured zero damaging tectonic readings. Suddenly its carved-seeming surface erupted revealing dormant vessels, characteristics immediately contradicting known design parameters, severely incongruent xenotech equivalency parameters, fragmented fleet craft, manifesting brittle structures, colder metallurgic sense, emitting unspoken disruptor fields, affecting cerebral signal gravity perception, dampening crucial for synapse movement efficiency coordination. Ancient monokeels adorned distinct necrotic runic lines, consistently labeled across subsequent official annals necrons. Clumsy drifting biomass tyrannid fleet, descending towards feasible world consumption, imploding into sudden staggering brightness, objectively registering beautiful explosive annihilations against collision vector priorities, consumed implacable pinpoint particle annihilation streams forged annihilation, beyond combustible parameters, targeting cruelly intercepted bioships shattered into consumption, dispersing worthless clouds, millionfold expended warrior larvae scattered, cosmos silently efficacious. Inconsequential prey insect-like problem, deleted contemplation, practical indifference. Initial tremor relief near visible unfurling station, council's parsecs distant linking secures, saved. Savage unstoppable devourers smote effortlessly technological supremacy, unimagined promising alliances, conceivable technological marvels potential lifetimes, create Earth-cast marvels. Ethereal Antal decision interaction, undertaking diplomatic maneuver, ordered without even concealing personal conviction rare benevolent synchronicity, uplifting signal positive resolution species collusion philosophy, greater good extended improbable circumstance, traveled swiftly personally joining assigned honor guardian anchor vessel entering Kaya's orbit meticulously reception protocols, arranged achieving careful culturally appropriate spectrum harmonies, coursing cross-communication linked. Expectant fleet positioning collective spirit hopeful encounter. The Necron accept greeting instance peaceful visual encounter approved. Said honorable ethereal step temporal generate light heraldry meeting designated hallow point arranged earth agents specifically specified void perfectly neutral designated coordinates elegant form elicited parsh grace moving auxiliaries cautiously signaled ceremonial approach. Immediately lethal, emotionless response eradication impersonal dismissal priority threat categorized organic matter obstructions clearing pathway vessel consolidation efficiency determined necessary immediately. Autonom targeting emitter lance cutting positions, triggered dispassionately, ensuing immediate flash neutralized vessel occupants, containment, unacknowledged significance Tiao leadership, maximum spiritual zenith, pivotally targeted. Physical corporeal vessel, shattered entirely planetary survey drones, shocked records telemetry playbacks, each reassessed cold sorrow acknowledgement, punctuated occurring without discerned haste, perfectly coordinated signal dispatches, concluded entire formation systematically, began radiating harsh beam-effusing patterns Kaya's, continents harvested Tiao colonists, stranded worlds executed moments later meticulously tractor, beamed extracted exterior processing plants, unexplained objective. Information relay imminent center undertaking bombing RAL, miraculously evacuating shuttles, signaling katana masters, priority undetermined horror category, solidified. Ethereals Council cloaked meeting chamber, discussed unheard scenarios possibilities logic without precedent suddenly forced emergency protocol broadcasts, glyphs stood stark urgent orders issued binding, SEP certified immediacy evacuate key task, intended colony strategic intersections, Carmi systems established trade nexus Abita zone Sierra, 6 sectors directly closest interior pressure point core, world Kelshan intricate planned defense ordinances, overlay initiating civilian. Movements mass logistical discord immediately overwhelming firecast, assigned guard contingencies, diverted desperate consolidation, pathway nav points Preston local cluster beacon Alpha Rho, assigned expeditionary maneuver, conducted reluctantly approved experience boots on ground evacuation, injected imminent insecurity targeting shifts, phasing fleet vectors, redirected guarded convoys, prioritizing sacred water cast archives, hidden facilitated critical transfers building fleet. Templates. Amidst attempting, execute impossible evacuation, secure possible. Caution mining cluster operative evacuation, Phalanx passenger carrier, complementing 30,000 souls. Inside deployment protocol Killia static jump formation under angled stellar lane, radiates engaged polar wave countering signature detected moments shielding proving obsolete accumulated Tyranid Prowler class bioships, hidden passing Comedoc tail embraced engagement destructive capability, perfected evolved countless Imperial backwater gulfs, consuming fully unaware slow cargo. Flotilla rendezvous points interrupted, surprise absolute. Detection lagged 0.8 quarta, preceding silent transits, evaded monitoring drones, effectively patterned stellar shadow camouflage, newly identified evolutionary counter within limited timeframe. Engulfed completely 300 souls, transient fleets destroyed concise efficiency, optimized carnage cycle precision horror, lasting under 3 gruesome hours passive monitoring collectives, nearby defense arrays, recorded unfolding said shifts, witnessing silent explosions, contaminating void positions, valuable listening, post simultaneous deep scans, registering biomass absorption, documented confirmed nanoseconds raw tonnage, consumed increasing registered hive fleet power gains, strategic disaster. Impossible grief overcoming avant-garde defense Kroot cyborg auxiliaries, assigned staging outcrop helpless violent indignation. Subsequent analysis pinpointed deep engagement vicinity, solitize rift navigational hazard became immediate plan coordinating permitary boundaries, utilized Tiao Kelshan fleet positions, gather Admiral Koravaroth leadership, intercept chosen transit vector convoy, awaited secured. Briefly hope flared tactical sweeps, converging adjacent star position, intense strafing runs, concentrated enduring vessel classes, previously adapted laser tolerance manifesting devastating newly researched ion cannon ripple fire shredding biological ship pressure, concealing fluid sacs crippling propulsion, partially neutered fleet maneuvers, critical gains watching cloak, observe Vanguard degrade lead cruisers, proceed cautiously attempting construction decisive termination, via singularity generator. Deployment then abruptly shifted counter persistence, occurred previously assumed mastered Tyranid biology, displayed new flayed adaptations impossible restructuring inner plasma intake membranes, shielding electromagnetic conduction fields, previously effect now null dedicated battlesuit plasma rifle units fired drills registering impact, dissipated harmlessly within dense biolayers, emphasizing fundamentally shifted adaptation, hopelessly counter-intuitive timing, permitted immediate strategic. Retreat forced absorbed unacceptably heavy cruiser losses, retreating required tactical emphasis, placed cunning carefully timed seeker, barrage collapsing key Nurgle-class biologic warp projection organisms, preventing fleet escaping consequence, enabled tactical breather minute, apparently minimal planetary grid preparations, gaining vital chrono units established orbital shipyards. Horavan diverted fleet jump dimension sonics spiked within Kelshan primary dense gravitation, while none anticipated the warp bleed point, precisely near SEP main staging area vessel, match-precise identification, coded Imperial cruisers emerged battered, yet fully intact showing profound archaic hallmarks, designed temperament sensor analyzed recognizable patterns, confirming puzzling arrival designation, matching original Damocles, Gulf Crusade reinforcement flotilla, dispatched Sol. Tragically trapped localized Immaterium maelstrom vortex temporal displacement, preserved perfectly unaware unfolding century half-transformative erosion emperors, subject stole subsequent galactic history, surrounding sudden sparking targeting protocols, instantly feeling surrounded crystalline ceramite nightmare, instantly exploded hostile ion storms, expected mundane threat calculation performed. Contested territory priority assessment authorized ground commander, adjusted Castellan Krask 18th Cadian shock designation, understood battle plans, authorized planetary landings, scheduled bombardment, escaped slight shield fluctuations, received transmitting Imperial Dur script demands, instantaneous submission, Emperor crush weak opponent shake skills, establish purification zones preparation. Simultaneously seeking sensor focused beyond pressing Kelshan primary defenses, triggering deep warnings specific biosign identifiers, increasing emerging fragmented signals cascade, nearing bearing unmistakable Tyranid leading hive fleet formation, emerging directly adjacent synchronous attack, pattern impending collision horrific inevitable impossible geometry, colliding enemies above Kelshan's trembling sphere. Koravaroth alert realized establishing message singularity pulsing, desperate imperative navigator blast, coordinated hailing frequency intensities, guaranteed reception simple binary, communique surrendering honor dual request, propose communal defense against existential emergence. Krask Secondary Flag Strategic Flag Direct Engagement Frontline Commander Tactical Very Literal Route Immediately Understood Void Presences Escalating Beyond Organic Homing Fleet Deployment Patterns Simultaneous Artillery Barrage Unfolded Impossible Reality Shock Bridging Imperium War Rolling Tyranid Mass Emerging Coiled Energy Signature Weapons Convergence Unlikely Becoming Necessity Clause Understood Creatures Past Materials First Torch Ship Obliterated Tyranid Acid Battery Scout Advanced Pulse Cannon Protamine Bolt Envelop Wrap Connected Explosive Detonations Initiating Critical Weapon System Discord Tearing into Madly Evolving Gaping Screen Monstrous Beasts Incredible Combined Imperium Lance Vaporizing Crystalline Warrior Batches Wondrous Beautiful Terrible Dissonance Overwhelming Mechanica Signatures Expanding Puzzle Confused Unholy Mind Forces Managed Contour Disruption Beautifully Overwhelming Uncordial Space Linked Allied Pursuing Escape Directed Plasma Binding Munitions Fragments Rending Suit Blockades Developing Hardened Cysts Disappeared instantly underneath Searing Melt-a-Beam Clusters. This unexpected synchronic assault destroyed organic integrity. Dozens hive ships unable conceptualize simultaneously evolve against electrochemical pulsing energy and solid-state propulsion, explosive mundane kinetic destruction, patterns simultaneously shredding impossibly versatile evolutionary defenses, Great Sacrifice Open Pathway Fleet Direct Confrontation Center Mandala Formations Vital Creatures Finding Uncalibrated Slaughter Priceless Expenditure Inflicted Barely Coherent. Entire force applied maintaining constant pressure coordination Azure allowed efficient repair windows lasting singular recon spearhead fleet precariously tilting balance terrifying cost justified extinction averted orbit momentarily contested holding breath observing desperate orbit retraction signals bounced countermand Columbia directives Imperial command ship debris vanished into void hungry waves comprise emptying press coffered vessels capable barely retained rank. Kelshan landing zones became boiling cauldrons simultaneous fire warrior engagements Cadian's imperative coordinated tactical without agreement operational cognizance tactics intertwined fire warrior teams pinpoint laser fusion suppressing ripper swarms thickening gaunt forward pressed mobile positions synergized durable lemon rust counter smiting monstrous creatures grinding potential exposed flanks rotating overwatch positions crucially preventing synapse creature openings flank applied. Exactly specialist crude auxiliary javelins, precise ambush pressure points, enable destructive coordinated hammerhead polarizing, strikes simultaneously destroying entrenched necrotic synapse nodes, paralyzing local swarming coordination, crucial extraction squadrons gathered positions coordination fighting, retreats barely tenable witnessing profound waste scarce resources, applied respected mutually, allowing Imperial Titan contingents, step ignited critical minefields belts protecting. Defensive evacuation corridors extensive Imperial armor regiments, paying dearly admirable tactical understanding, blended seamlessly across cultural gulfs, unimaginably deep common enemy forge, instant undeniable awkward necessity circumstance, saving mutual survival demanding cessation petty ideologies, nothing less bitterly observed, grudgingly instrumental valuable battlefield tactics, traded green armor floods, signals golden icons, authorizing shielding, erratic, unaware reciprocal. Strategist reasons initiated key strategic breathing spaces, miraculously salvage valuable prototypes, data clusters secured ethereal bunkers, safe carelessly lost barely conceived moment constructive flexibility, occur anticipated coordination protocols, siloed separate existence irrelevant simultaneous attack strains, literally shattering rigid synapse flow chains, breaking concentration irreplaceable vessels, above rippling severe shockwave cleansing brightness emerald pulse artillery. Who later farsighted Cadians denied fighting, shoulder intimate, implying fraternity impossible corrupt stiff, upper lip preached imperial creed fighting, thought inconsistently observed report carefully indicate timing, save participated integral coordination pilots recognize subtle disregard honestly performance mutual respecting discipline, achieved professionalism, impossible replicate independently plausible deniability political faction, neutralizing inevitable confrontations. Inevitable Station Council, however absolute desperation, produced unexpected dividend future log analysis, identified convergence further demonstrated critical shortcoming, inherent Gorgon methodology weapon speciality, extremely narrow rapidly created biocounter-specific profiles, required testing, encountered strictly segmented opponent unit infrastructure consume afterwards, immediately narrowed energy-resistant plating theoretically incinerated plasma, decay rifle process. Slightly adjusted next encounter, completely remetabolized. Simultaneously facing utterly divergent hazard profiles Imperial munitions, impacts solid slugs, cracked neural bundles focused bio-armor plating cybernetic resonance thrower, unleashed unexpected jump pack lithobrake, pattern cratering supporting Carnifex heavy pins formations, clustered struggling logistical overhead, hampered crucial vital links, shattered specialized biostocks limited regeneration capacities, one synapse, thinker redundant backups, insufficiently depth responsible. Immediate reproductive chain disruption, catastrophic irreplaceable components, destroyed permanent widening cracks, pervasive difficulties, supposition confirmed. Total victory condition after long grinding conflict, achieved blades, crossed trenches biological biomass site registration cairn symbol, erected above bioform contamination spires, identified deepest scoured location, intense primary strategic spawning organ intracellular known tyrannid sacrificial cult tide, existence final battle high mountains breach ridge named worldspine, inherent, indicated precisely critical mop clearing, forever exterminated thick monstrous flesh protective. Barriers annihilated amidst myriad chaos, pressing conflict's impassable defender immune to pulse rounds fallen mortar shells. 18th Cadia mobile artillery, fire pinpoint concentrating beams damnation, literally split creature cranial zones, imploded finally collapsing sacs oozing crucial reproductive acids, consuming below shrieking pseudo-neurons net, ablaze final hive tyrant limbless driven immobilization beams, slicing vibrant spark, consumed fusion blade strike, terminating command synapse network collapsing Keltian biosphere infestation, functionally disabled starting systematic clearance operations planet. Wide liberation screaming certain grim, anticipated dawn watching bioflora, withering visible minute. Threat abated finally decapitation 1,000 lives, consumed tenfold reaching multiple stars, incalculable across Tiao expansion zones, undefended Imperial fringe garrisons, immolated collateral fused societal scar, universally recognized seeding scarred planetary ecosystems, never vibrant resonance simply echoing loss, forever infrastructure materials, initial investments erased utterly important or rich worlds, Karat found hollowed parched microbiome, destroyed drifting tomb frat. Atmosphere billowing clouds toxic residue, traces mineral veins waste. Research protocols interrupted priceless decades, headed watercast theorist circles silenced fire warrior academies, recorded losses reaching estimates intolerable manageable rebuilding generations, devoured in grinding attrition tens thousands souls, perished uncounted auxiliary populations, caught environment crossfire civilian family groups, eradicated biotic K route evacuation, shuttles consumed prior atmospheric escape. Shattering blow ethereal council records confirming Senatorum Ultima, irreversible losses, ethereal antal narrative clarification, incessant Nexron betrayal crisis wasting body, simultaneously ethereal Kayat, lost Nevakresh orbital cordon ton forces, collapsed synapses attack shrine layered ethereal detachment, destroyed critical moments complexity, assured planetary defense, evaded planetary invasion, stampede overwhelming concentrated psychic disturbances, undefended spiritual anchors. Yet renewal begins constructed crucible horror forged advancements critical necessary examining shattered remnants, examining tyrannid carapace resistance, Earthcast laboratories tirelessly innovated membranes, integrating captured data yielding radical pulse weapon power networks efficiency, stepped kinetics grant enhanced harmonic sharp refinement, practical battlefield gear refinements, field tested brutal immediate necessity prototype armor weaving dispersing plasma charges. Unstoppably developed advanced infiltration survivability lessons, embedded doctrine tape projector, re-emerging resource critical. Firecast veterans experience catalog impossible adaptable threat, forcing reassessment static defense theory, rigid maneuvering evident mistakes, identified proud core systems visible and report collateral damage, incurred concentrating fire prevailed understanding flexibility, key save accepting alternative urgency doctrine, review inevitable submission timeline reproduced academy strike shock renewal processes, refined education patterns, rewrote strategic principles mimetic recall. Transferred generation, prime valuable terrifyingly bought priceless survival tool. Most crucially culturally accepted understood universe, demands fluidity constraining honor chains, rigidly unquestioned application, deepest strategic accomplishment, extracted embrace outside influences, critically reallocate resource, diversely deploy immutable sobriety insufficient universe, proving inconsistency paramount indispensable facet long-term survival greater obligation vision, persist transcend dangerous ideologies, offering alternative galaxy pieces cooperative and patiently eradicated soul fear propagate rift eventual enlightenment necessity, revealed horrifically vision withstand tragedies, inevitable patience purest blade, forged evolutionary spectrum unstoppable demonstrated simultaneously, immense galactic challenges, requiring indomitable collective response symbiosis, inevitable prevailed supremely adaptable existence triumphs, unflinching pragmatism, paired rare nobility, persists relentless flame uncertainty, dances awkwardly amidst sorrow. Gravity echoing truths learnt amongst the screams consumed worlds, perspectives, irrevocably shifted, indispensably gained greater. Understanding surviving starblanketing shadow possibleness, inherent every terrible moment, endured wisdom etched, unforgettably painful waypoint towards, unwritten chapters harsh possibilities, flickering rendezvous points unmapped void absorbing hopeful despair, equally sustaining patient circular heartbeat strategy, continued nevertheless secret diary notation ethereals. Whispered contemplation, closure possible redemption, eternal project, one sole possible moment danger. Accepted calculated move towards uncertain dawn understood deeply ingrained adaptability. One thread tapestry conviction advance greater good necessarily. Lacked recognizing human reciprocation possibility. Remained potential treasure, painstakingly cultivated within fractured empire emerging stronger. Refined unimaginable trauma sustained determined, offering salvation persistent conviction. Whatever nightmare form next manifests inevitable tyrannid adaptability, becoming core philosophy, symbolizing overcoming impossible odds, resilient survival valuable mistake, understanding fundamental nature universe adaptation, taught precious knowledge irreplaceably gained resilience example, remembered emulated across sept worlds encountering impossible darkness, illuminated solely enduring perseverance. The celebration of victory against the Gorgon's tendrils felt hollow beneath the pale light of Kelshan's moons, air thick with plasma residue and unvoiced recriminations. While Imperial commanders tallied losses and Toa strategists documented the adaptive leap that secured their survival, the embrace of fluid tactics over ossified doctrine, a martial virtue finally elevated to its rightful prominence within their culture, a silent chill seeped into the moment. Triumph was undeniable, yet incomplete, fatally so, for amidst the debris swirling in the Delmare system, a crucial, shuddering truth lingered. Coron's pursuing fleet had annihilated one fleeing hive ship, but at the horrific cost of the carrier Firestar, and more critically, the remaining two vessels had vanished screaming into the void beyond the rim. They took with them a grotesque treasure earned in blood and agony, the genetic memory of every adaptation, every desperate countermeasure the Gorgon had engineered to rip through Toa technology, dismantle Toa tactics. The solemn conclave that followed, water-caste diplomats conferring with granite-faced imperial lords, produced a chilling consensus. This lethally honed knowledge, they theorized, could only disseminate if these survivors physically rejoined another hive fleet. A tragic miscalculation etched in ignorance, for the tyrannid swarm's consciousness was a cold, pervasive void thought, transcendent, indifferent to gulfs of space. The vicious lessons learned, the adaptive torture endured by the Gorgon, weren't trapped within fleeing chitin hulls. They were already bleeding into the synaptic soup of the greater hive mind. Future assaults against the Toa, against the Imperium, against every fragile spark of life in the galaxy, would be bloodier, crueler, intelligently savage. As Imperial vessels powered their drives to depart Kelshan orbit, the fragile alliance crumbling even as the last war detritus cooled, neither victor truly grasped the magnitude of their Pyrrhic salvation. A silent fracture opened again amidst the stars. Humanity and Toa had, for a fleeting, shimmering moment, stood shield to shield against obliteration, each covering the other's fatal weaknesses. It was transitory, born of shared terror rather than deep fellowship, yet in this dark millennium where species greet one another with bolt shell and pulse pistol far more often than open palm, even that fragile concurrence felt achingly precious. It was a ghost of possibility, a fleeting glimpse of what might rise if entities could stretch beyond the suffocating prisons of species and empire, towards some distant, unifying principle. Consider then this notion, this elusive ideal invoked by the blue-skinned newcomers, the greater good. Dawn is a quiet conspirator over Toa worlds. Its nascent light finds settlements stirring, not with the clamor of bells or the omnipresent imperial drone of industry, but with a profound, shared silence. Within training courtyards, amid cooling towers, beside aquaculture pens, small circles form. Earth-cast technicians, their broad frames dusted with soil or coolant, settle alongside water-cast diplomats whose intricate robes seem spun from moonlit water. Air-cast exopilots, limbs sculpted for G-forces, almost willowy next to their comrades, clasp hands with thick-muscled fire warriors still radiating the heat of martial exercise. No sneering condescension mars their joined palms. Centering it all, eyes closed in profound focus, an ethereal stands, a calm apex around whom the murmured litany flows. Tava, the word ripples through the gathering not as a shout but as a profound exhalation, soft yet powerful, carrying the very weight of the creed that binds them across castes. The greater good. It shimmers in the pre-dawn air, starkly divorced from the calcified dogma of the imperial creed or the orcish ultraviolent jus primi noctis. There are no gods demanding fearful obeisance here, no celestial guillotine hanging over deviation. Instead, this is a vast, encompassing philosophy of collective survival, a bedrock understanding that the flourishing of the whole organism demands the guiding of individual actions, that cooperation isn't a weakness but the only path to survival in a hostile cosmos where solitary sparks are snuffed out with cosmic indifference. These truths crystallize into core principles dripping with practical necessity. First and most fundamental, every sentient being possesses an intrinsic role within the vast, intricate tapestry of the Empire's existence. Like an organism requiring heart, lungs, limbs, each function, however seemingly humble, is essential for life. The robust Earth-caste farmer coaxing sustenance from stubborn soil beneath alien suns is no less vital than the Fire-caste commander facing annihilation on a broken frontier. One life nourishes, the other defends the right to nourish. Second principle, the cult of ego finds no purchase in the path. Personal desire isn't extinguished but channeled, sculpted towards uplifting the collective crucible. When a fire warrior breaches an enemy's stronghold under impossible fire, shielded by nothing but courage, she does so transfixed not by dreams of decoration, but by the face of the comrade behind her, the settlement that shield shelters. When an Earth-caste engineer bleeds time and sweat through the night, refining a heat dispersion coil that will save fire warriors' lives, the satisfaction derives from knowing the shared lifeblood of the Empire flows stronger because of her sacrifice, potentially impacting millions unseen. Third, and arguably the sharpest departure from galactic stasis, the religion of progress. Where the Imperium venerates the corrupted corpuscles of a brighter past and trembles before innovation like a heretic, the Toa embrace change as life's undeniable pulse, perpetual growth not only possible, but imperative for survival against encroaching night. This elegant framework transforms what could be a rigid, resentful caste structure into a profoundly functional, almost organic division of labor. Harmony doesn't mean uniformity. Each caste grounds its fierce pride in its specialized role. The Earth caste finds deep-rooted fulfillment in shaping reality, strong backs and unflinching pragmatism expressed in leveled mountains, transformed into hydroponics towers, intricate citaspires that kiss alien skies, and factories breathing life into devastatingly effective battlesuits. An artisan shaping an energy manifold for 3 grueling months feels the quiet pulse of completeness knowing it interlocks with the strivings of others, becomes part of something indispensable protecting the whole. But perhaps the greater good's most startling testament, its affront to galactic orthodoxy, lies beyond the blue-sapped grasp of Toa themselves, its audacious extension to alien kind. While humanity's shattered empire offers only crucifix or boltron to the non-human, the Toa extend an open hand, carved with the symbols assimilation and service. Witness the Kroot, primal avians, genomic shapeshifters steeped in predator culture. They seem anathema to sterile Tau precision. Yet, guided by wise Krut shapers, they serve the Tava with jagged loyalty, executing the brutal close-quarters butchery the fire warriors abhor yet urgently require to cleanse a contested landing zone, fanged vital organs acting in synergy with the distant, precise punch of railgun fire. Ascendancy beyond pure pragmatism. Study the Vespids. Maligned by suspicious Imperials as mind-slave drones, the insectoid warriors buzz through the lethal skies, vibrant wings keeping pace with hammerhead gunships. They communicate across the chasm of evolution via Earth-caste-crafted translator helmets, devices innate shape wrapping antenned skulls in silver that sparks fevered whispers among Ordo's agents of insidious control. Yet the creatures fight with undeniable fervor, their warbuzz harmonizing strangely with the communal chanting of protecting the shared colony the greater good represents. Most disruptive of all, however, is the insidious, undeniable appeal the creed holds for disillusioned humanity. On countless backwater worlds forever ravaged by Imperial tax forces and press gangs scouring villages for cannon fodder, the Watercast's message falls on parched ground. Gevisa, human partners, now swell Toa ranks, human soldiers marching in disciplined cadence alongside bonded fire warriors securing volatile frontiers, human farmers tilling newly irrigated lands once choked by Imperial tribute requisitions. A Gevisa farmer might never parse the intricate metaphysics of the greater good, might stumble over the term Tava, but the tangible truth they grasp is undeniable. Sanctuary for marauders who once plundered with Imperial sanction. Access to advanced Medikey units stitching shattered limbs without demanding holy coin. Freedom from the crushing vice of Imperial tithe. Simple dignity knowing their dawn-to-dusk labor sustains a civilization that acknowledges its worth. It is this potent alchemy lofty philosophy, forging concrete relief from galactic suffering, that transforms the greater good into such a seductive, dangerous alternative in a cosmos starved of hope. The chasm between for the Emperor, and for the Tava, couldn't be wider. Imperial dogma screams humanity's divine destiny to shatter alien spines underfoot, proclaiming other life-filth demanding purgation. The Toa propose the heretical vision that diverse sentience combined, a tapestry woven from strange threads, can achieve survival, even fleeting prosperity, impossible in splendid isolation. The Imperial Creed demands fanatical allegiance to dusty dogma forged in forgotten ages. The Tava encourages cold rationale, unending questioning, refining strategy, adapting relentlessly to a changing universe. Where Imperial commanders fling oceans of sacrificial humanity into meat-grinder campaigns, the Toa meticulously calculate, preferring precise, overwhelming strikes only after diplomatic courses run irrevocably dry, valuing lives with chilling calculus. Understand, though, the Toa are neither gleaming choirboys singing harmony amidst barbarians. Their shining spheres of influence carry bloodstains. Worlds refusing their offer find themselves staring down the unblinking barrels of railcannons rather than administrators. However enlightened, the greater good still orbits a blazing Tau star. Alien partners serve within the Empire, cherished but inherently separate, somehow always one step away from equal footing. To assess Tava demands candid eyes locked on both its crystalline achievements and the cracks snaking through. Its staggering success as social engineering is undeniable. It forged disparate castes and species into an unprecedentedly cohesive force, expanding from obscurity to multisystem power within generations. Technological marvels bloom where imperial worlds only decay. Yet unsettling fractures shadow this unified field. The Ethereals' absolute authority, serene and unchallenged, hangs heavy over every meditation circle. Is such unquestioning loyalty freely given, resonant in every fire warrior heart, or does some profound mechanism beyond conscious thought bind them, instilled from generations of genetic legacy woven by these enigmatic prophets? Dissent, too, poses delicate questions. Public defiance of ethereal wisdom is an unimaginable ghost within Toa space. Is this reflective of perfectly resonant guidance, undeniable wisdom? Or do methods transparent only to the caste leaders ensure uncomfortable thoughts dissolve before they breach the serene surface? Examples like Farsight, the rogue commander, a tragic comet blazing beyond ethereal light with his realm, whisper of profound schisms existing beneath the placid ice of universal harmony. For bonded allies, integration promises evolutionary assimilation. Human children born under the Toa sphere learn Tava, alongside ancestral hymns, Kroot lore gradually eclipsed by tactical theories. Is this a natural gravitation towards perceived rational benefits, or a meticulously calculated fading of identity, ensuring only one prime loyalty to the Ethereals above race or creed? Simple answers vaporize in the harsh vacuum of the 41st millennium's grim reality. The greater good shines neither as utopia nor insidious mental control. It is a practical covenant forged in fire, a desperate attempt to chain meaning, purpose, some fragile structure through shared purpose swirling over a void where individual lives are less than cosmic dust on a voidship hull. Ultimately, perhaps its true measure lies not in theoretical moral perfection, but in a stark, utilitarian comparison. Does it construct a society offering marginally more justice, marginally less suffering than the gnawing horror offered by the alternatives? By that brutally practical standard, despite the unanswered whispers, the rationalizing shadows, the deeply questionable cost of unity, the greater good flickers on imperfect, yet undeniably brighter than the shrieking darkness engulfing so much else. Now shifting focus from grand philosophy to biological imperatives. That first encounter often startles unprepared humans, locking gazes across a damp trench or sterile negotiation table with these blue-gray beings. Exotic features dominate the unsettlingly inert skin, the prominent ridge replacing a brow, the face seeming strangely compressed, lacking the familiar human nose bridge projection. Yet perceived beneath this alien topography lingers an unnerving echo, an almost jarring resonance of familiar sentience. Intelligence sparks fluidly in the large, dark eyes scrutinizing you, a fierceness and worry mirrored despite profound dissimilarity. It's glimpsed also in that stance, upright, purposeful, radiating an inherent dignity that humans instinctively recognize within our own troubled species. The humanoid form is shared, undeniable structure, bipedal locomotion, dexterous three-fingered hands manipulating advanced tools. Then differences cascade. Skin ranges across deep sea blues to pale moonlit grays, raw-textured and completely anhydrous, a heritage from their arid world where hydration was fiercely contested. A fire warrior removing her helmet is no sweat-slicked grunt. Her features remain composed, leathery surface immaculate under hard vacuum or suffocating jungle humidity. The facial structure itself surprises most, broad and flattened, especially emphasizing the pronounced hooded orbits that shelter those arresting, disconcertingly large eyes. Where bone and cartilage lift the human nose center stage, The Toa possess only a subtle, near-invisible vertical slit, terminating just beneath their mouth, region actually housing olfactory organs within their oral cavity. This peculiar architecture has led many an imperial envoy observing a Toa paused in deep contemplation, inhaling silently through this inner channel, to misinterpret it as disdainful boredom or a suppressed yawn, occasionally sparking disastrous exchanges. The eyes possess profound distinctions, larger in proportion, capable of seeing further into the infrared than merely augment eyes, faintly into ultraviolet advantages painfully practical. A Toa Pathfinder identifies prey's residual heat trail long after human vision fails in twilight acres, perceives nanoscopic stress fractures on a hull section invisible to unaided flesh senses. Such expanded perception comes at physiological cost. Absent the rapid dilation and contraction of the human iris, depth perception suffers. Focusing on sudden threats requires noticeably more time. The first impression humans often fixate upon when encountering a Tau warrior, scholar, or artisan is the distinct solidity of their frame ending not in soft-skinned feet, but in cloven hooves. These tough keratin structures, reminiscent perhaps of ancient Terran herd animals, but adapted for vastly more complex environments, provide an inherent stability upon the fractured scree of alien battlefields, the polished decks of voidcraft, or the uneven workshops of their worlds. Yet it's the hands, dexterous despite their apparent limitation of just 4 digits 3 fingers, and one surprisingly supple, fully opposing thumb that truly challenge preconceptions. Watch a Firecast engineer assemble a battlesuit subsystem under fire, or an Earthcast craftmaster calibrate micrometers on a drone processor core, and the illusion of limitation shatters. These hands, seemingly lean and limited compared to a human analog, manipulate complex mechanisms with an elegance and speed that defies logic, enabling the creation and mastery of technology that frequently overshadows imperial equivalents. A human artificer witnessing such dexterity would likely stare in humbled disbelief. Tools become seamless extensions, components dance under that four-fingered touch to birth marvels of applied physics. Perhaps even more fundamental to the Tau, however, is the profound and almost unnatural absence radiating from them to those attuned to the immaterium. In a cosmos suffused by the warp, where its turbulent energies brush against and sometimes flood the souls of nearly every sentient race, the Tau stand as serene voids. To a psyker activating their witch sight, where a human soul blazes like an incandescent pyre brimming with the light of faith, the flicker of emotion, and always vulnerable to the dark tendrils seeking purchase, a Tau soul appears as little more than a faint, translucent ripple, a shifting ephemeral haze obscuring nothing substantial. This profound lack of psychic resonance is a shield, a blessing etched into their very being. It renders them utterly immune to the seductive, soul-crushing whispers of the chaos gods. Not a single recorded instance exists of a Tau falling to ruinous powers or manifesting the hideous warp-induced mutations that inflict such horror upon humanity. Their minds remain sanctuaries, demons find no foothold in their dreams, their thoughts remain impervious to possession, and crucially, their societies are free from the deep-seated, paralyzing dread of warp predation that permeates every level of human culture, from the ecclesiarchy to the gutters of Hive Primus. Yet this boon comes shackled to a profound limitation. Where humanity plunges headlong through the screaming hell of the warp guided by tortured navigators, the Tau are irrevocably bound to the pedestrian pace of real space. Their mighty fleets crawl between stars at agonizing sublight velocities, making their expansion across the galaxy a comparative crawl next to the Imperium's warp-skipping warships. They lack the soul-boned astropaths for sending thoughts whispering across the light years, forced instead to rely on sprawling networks of vulnerable relay stations and slow courier craft. Most dangerously of all, while their sharp scientific minds acknowledge the warp exists as a dimension of raw energy, they possess a terrifyingly shallow understanding of its true, monstrously predatory nature. This dangerous innocence, born of isolation, has lured more than one curious science-cast expedition into oblivion when delving too deeply into that which they fundamentally cannot perceive, consequences unfolding around unsuspecting minds. Observing Tau society, particularly through a human cultural lens, another subtle difference emerges. Sexual dimorphism is remarkably understated. Female Tau might be distinguished by slightly smoother cranial contours, marginally larger ocular apertures that perhaps grant a subtly wider field of view, or occasionally a facial slit shaped closer to a shallow, wide configuration, in contrast to the often more angular presentations seen in males. Their vocalizations tend to pitch marginally higher, but the difference lacks the stark contrast familiar to human ears. Crucially, within any given caste, physical capability shows negligible variation. A female fire warrior carries her pulse rifle with the same lethal precision, moves with the same battle-honed fluidity, and endures the same hardships as her brother standing beside her. Command positions across the spectrum of caste roles reflect this parity. Ethereal councils, fire caste strike commanders, earth caste overseers, they are all shaped by meritocracy where sex is irrelevant. The legendary commander Shadowsun, architect of victories that echo across the Damocles Gulf, ascended to her revered rank purely through the blazing furnace of tactical brilliance and unwavering commitment to the greater good, her gender being a barely noted footnote in the annals of her achievements. This de-emphasis extends beyond physiology into the societal structure itself. Social roles, labor divisions, and positions of authority are almost exclusively governed by the rigid framework of the castes. Gender, divorced from destiny, plays a minor part in the complex calculus of who pursues what duty within the tapestry of the Tava, creating a society far less stratified along those particular biological lines than many of its human counterparts in the benighted Imperium. Yet the most terrifying, critically defining characteristic of the Tau, the one that truly underwrites their improbable rise, lies deep within their neurology, an unparalleled capacity for cognitive adaptation and societal evolution. Their ascent from mastering stone tools to launching interstellar vessels span mere millennia, a blink in the cosmic eye compared to the agonizingly slow crawl of humanity through the shadows of old night. A human xenobiologist, her report stamped with the highest classification seals, dissected terrified specimens captured on a brutal frontier conflict. Her conclusion cut to the marrow of the Tau threat. What makes these xenos truly dangerous is not their current technology, formidable as it might be. Isolation and rigorous study might eventually yield imperial parity. Nor is it their unifying philosophy. However pervasive, we possess the strength of spirit and faith to counter it. It is the sheer, terrifying plasticity of their collective mind. They observe our tactics, our technologies, our societal patterns as one might dissect a captured prey species. Then they learn, synthesize, and adapt with a velocity unmatched by any sentient species recorded in our extensive archives. Pose a problem to the Tau, and they do not merely engineer one solution. They conceptualize three, often more, each possessing an elegant, ruthlessly efficient simplicity we witness only in the isolated genius minds of our own most lauded magos or tactica masters. It is as if an entire species possesses this accelerated cognitive pattern. Even the most rapid orchid mutations feel clumsy by comparison. This relentless adaptability cannot be denied in its results. An emergent species, lacking both overwhelming physical might and the omnipresent psychic connection defining the cosmos, has nonetheless carved a vibrant, aggressively expanding stellar empire in the brutal crucible of the modern galaxy. They thrive where countless embryonic civilizations are snuffed out by predators hungry for territory or souls. This foundational intelligence, this species-wide capacity for rapid synthesis and integration, fundamentally shapes their approach not just to progress, but to the inevitable crucible of warfare. The fundamental truths of their combat doctrine resonate back to their origins as predators hunting the sprawling plains of their homeworld. Then, as now, they possessed no illusions about their physical vulnerability. They lack the sheer, plate-crushing strength of the orc brute, the obscene regenerative horrors of the Tyranid swarm, or humanity's legacy of archaeotech and colossal, Gothic war machines casting long, terrifying shadows across narratives millennia old. Instead, they brought preternatural intellect, seamless coordination forged by millennia of cooperation, and that chilling speed of adaptation to the battlefield. Witness the grinding meat-grinder tactics of the Astra Militarum, throwing wave after wave of guardsmen into the breach, commanders accepting horrific losses as the unavoidable price of territorial gain to the Tau mindset. Such profligacy with sentient life is neither glorious nor necessary. It is barbaric horror. Each fire warrior represents considerable caste resources, years of dedicated training, discipline honed like finest steel, and untiring devotion to the Tava. Each life is a valued thread in the fabric of the greater good, an asset not to be squandered recklessly. This core belief manifests relentlessly throughout their warfighting, a preference for fluid, mobile engagements, devastating precision strikes targeted at critical vulnerabilities rather than wasteful broad-front assaults, the calculated application of overwhelming, focused firepower at decisive moments. Tau commanders possess no sense of nobility in futile last stands. They will unhesitatingly disengage, vanish using optical cloaks or disciplined retrograde movement if tactical reality dictates, preserving force structure to fight again under more favorable circumstances. This hardied pragmatism is often misread as cowardice by imperial generals steeped in doctrines of stoic endurance, but those who survive the encounter emerge bearing scars and a hard-won respect for the unnerving strategic flexibility of the blue-skinned foe. The operational logic of their engagements, the refined tactics perfected over generations, draw direct lineage from the ancestral hunting patterns practiced millennia ago and now elevated to the art of interstellar war. Two complementary philosophies form the backbone: Montka, the killing blow, and Koyan, the patient hunter. Montka is surgical lethality amplified to a macro scale. It embodies lightning-swift, utterly decisive violence focused precisely on the enemy's heart, the command node, the primary power source, the critical supply nexus. A Montka operation begins not with overwhelming noise, but with absolute silence. Reconnaissance at multiple echelons, infiltrated pathfinders painting targets with marker lights, stealth drones mapping defenses, signals interceptors hoarding enemy communications build a near-perfect picture. Forces move with chilling precision, often under stealth fields, converging from unseen angles. When the critical weakness is identified, overwhelming force concentrated through pulse volleys, railgun interdiction strikes from hovering vehicles, the sudden descent of crisis battlesuit teams is applied with near-simultaneous perfection. The enemy command structure might fracture and collapse before the first casualty report reaches surviving line officers. Victory, ideally absolute, is achieved in a single, brutally efficient orchestration. Koyan, by stark contrast, is an exercise in profound, almost tectonic patience, a masterful manipulation played across the strategic game board. It involves presenting the enemy with irresistible temptation, a seemingly vulnerable logistics column meandering through a pass, an insufficiently guarded resource hub, an isolated patrol wandering too far from its cohort. This lure, carefully selected to appeal to the opponent's psychology, a reckless orc warboss guaranteed to charge headlong, an Imperial commander desperate for a quick territorial gain, is cast. Meanwhile, the hunter waits, leveraging sophisticated stealth, dispersion, and sensor baffling. The prey takes the lure, commits its forces into the carefully designated killing ground, a canyon, a star system sensor shadow, an urban choke point. Only then do the jaws spring shut. Hammerheads locked onto targets painted by ghost-kill marksmen rise from camouflaged positions. Seeker missiles streak down from orbit only when the enemy is fully enveloped. Entire cadres decloak and unleash precise annihilation. The goal is the utter, near-bloodless eradication of the opposing force trapped within the web. Skilled Tau commanders, often fleet admirals or Shasso of long experience, are masters of stitching these doctrines together fluidly within a single campaign. A prolonged campaign against a resilient foe might begin with patient Koyan actions to probe defenses, erode morale, and grind down key assets through attritional strike-and-fade harassment, perfectly setting the stage for the final devastating Montka strike, a single focused blow dissolved that collapses the enemy center like termite-riddled timber. The organization of their military structures intrinsically supports this philosophy of orchestrated violence. The intimate bond forms at the smallest unit level. The team, typically grouping between 6 to 12 fire warriors under a chassui, a veteran, whose leadership emerged from hard-won combat recognition. These fights develop profound cohesion, solidified by the sacred ritual known as the bonding knife ceremony, where blood mingles and shared vows create seismic bonds that blur military ranks into camaraderie. These warriors become Kaimta, battle brothers and sisters transcending mere designation, permitted the intimate use of the personal name Porui Kaida, often softened further to Kai in the heat of battle rather than the formal declarations. Multiple such dedicated teams assemble to form a cadre, the fundamental tactical unit of the Tau military, roughly analogous to an Imperial Guard company, but far more functionally integrated. The cornerstone is the versatile hunter cadre, a combined arms formation blending pulse-armed fire warrior squads, heavy air-armored breacher teams for close-quarters actions when unavoidable, platoons of battlesuit pilots operating sleek XV-8 Crisis, or the heavier XV-88 broadside variants for heavy fire support, often spearheaded by pathfinders for forward reconnaissance and target designation. All orchestrated by incinerator support drones and rapid response antigravitic devilfish transports or gunships harrying exposed flanks. Command of the cadre falls to a proven chasseur or experienced chassel, strategists tempered through decades of frontline experience. When campaign objectives demand larger force concentrations, cadres converge to create contingents formations comparable in scale to an Imperial regiment, but assembled temporarily, task-specific entities designed for a specific conquest or defense before being reintegrated into other command structures upon mission completion. These significant deployments often include the direct oversight of a revered ethereal cast member, providing spiritual guidance, ensuring the Shamla remains unbroken, and guaranteeing every tactical decision resonates with the unifying beat of the greater good. only under apocalyptic circumstances, the encroaching shadow of a Tyranid hive fleet tendril, titanic struggles threatening core, sept worlds do the truly colossal formations, known as commands and coalitions, assemble. These awe-inspiring, seldom-seen concentrations gather forces from multiple septs and all castes, stretching logistical chains to their absolute limit for the existential defense of their burgeoning empire. What consistently elevates the tremendous Tau war effort beyond essential doctrinal brilliance and organizational cohesion, however, is their astonishing level of technological supremacy. Astonishingly young relative to the fossilized Imperium, they nonetheless wield arsenals that represent pinnacle achievements in numerous defined combat spheres. Their ubiquitous pulse weaponry exemplifies the qualitative transformation wrought by Tau engineering. Instead of deafening chemical explosions hurling chunks of metal or merely heating target surfaces like crude lasguns, the primary Fire Warrior pulse rifle fires a contained helix of magnetically contained plasma energy. This lethal bolt sears through flesh and boils armor plating with equal ease, the distinctive muted thunderclap followed by a high-pitched whine echoing as a particular melody of death across countless battlefields. Crucially, the significantly enhanced effective range allows Tau warriors to accurately engage and eliminate guardsmen, clawing towards them long before crude last rounds become more than uncertain harassment. The devastating scale mounts dramatically with their mastery of electromagnetic acceleration. Railguns mounted on the sleek hammerhead gunships, or the colossal silhouettes of the storm surge, battlesuits hurl hyperdense slugs at a significant fraction of light speed. The resulting kinetic impact possesses virtually unsurpassed armor penetration. Even a frontally engaged Lemon Russ Vanquisher, Imperial armor doctrine's mainstay, can be reduced instantly into a colossal explosion of molten slag and scattered spalling by a single, impeccably targeted shot bisecting its armored carapace. Beyond these primary killing elements operate secondary force multipliers focused entirely on augmentation. Networks of sophisticated battle network systems synchronize combat cohesion with terrifying efficiency, enabling sensory data gathered by infiltrated Pathfinder teams scanning thermal blooms or audio disruptions to instantly disseminate to every allied unit designated with complex coding across theater-wide Auspex grids. Micro-targeting systems refine ballistic trajectories into near perfection. Small, agile marker drones swarm forward under cover, painting priority targets with invisible laser grids visible only to Tau systems, guiding salvos of Skyray missile drones or orbiting Manta bombers onto their marks with soul-chilling precision. Shield drones generate localized energy fields hovering protectively near Fire Warriors, intercepting mortar shells or sniper rounds, costing the enemy ammunition and time that saves heavily invested lives. Entire Fire Warrior teams equipped with chainmail-cloaked uniforms and miniature stealth field generators vanish from hostile sensor, sweeps visual, thermal Auspex ghosting into shadow, enabling devastating deep strike disruptions, or setting layered ambushes where soldiers seem to coalesce limb from solid rock creep moments before the plasma pulses ignite the air. This overwhelming technological superiority perfectly complements the intrinsic Tau preference for ranged combat, where their enhanced targeting protocols, superior firepower projection, and unrivaled informational awareness grant them escalating advantages at longer distances. It forms the foundation of their doctrine. They cannot intrinsically fathom the Imperium's pervasive cultural reverence for close combat, the deafening cacophony of chainswords snarling into flesh, the desperate horror of trench raids descending into butchery, with entrenching tools or noble blades viewing it not as noble proof of conviction, but as a brutal state of Quintly, a fundamental failure of superior maneuvering and planning. Similarly, they fail entirely to comprehend creatures like orcs, whose joyous frenzied charges roaring towards melee distance represent the horrific antithesis of the Tauva's principle of efficiency and minimal loss. If the Montka strike falters or the Koyan trap springs shut incomplete, and the adversary closes the deadly distance undetected through sensor fog or sheer armored momentum, the Fire Warriors enter close combat only as a grim necessity, drawing the bonding knife as a last resort symbol, and seeking to exfiltrate or gain distance to re-establish devastating firing solutions as rapidly as possible. Looking beyond the immediate theater of war, the Tau expansion through the galaxy presents a stark counterpoint to humanity's own vast but fracturing empire, where the Imperium exploded outwards during the galaxy-spanning conquests known almost mythically as the Great Crusade under its semi-divine emperor, only to settle into a tortured 10 millennia siege mentality clinging desperately to crumbling borders. The Tau have evolved through distinct, structured phases termed spheres of expansion. Each sphere delineates a specific conceptual stage in their civilization's philosophical progression, incorporating periods of intense outward movement, carefully balanced with extended phases of consolidation, infrastructure development, and technological refinement. The journey began with the first sphere, ignited shortly after mastery of rudimentary spaceflight under the nascent guidance of the nascent ruling ethereal caste discovered. This profoundly cautious phase focused on the immediate stellar locale, orbiting their vibrant homeworld, Tau Prime. With propulsion technology limited to straining sublight drives, which translated interstellar voyages into multi-generational pilgrimages across the cold dark, seeded with unique long-duration psychological preparation, known only to generations born into the claustrophobic confines of void arcs traveling near light speed, these early voyages represented enormous sacrifice. Yet the Tau compensated for agonizing slowness through absolute commitment to meticulous planning and sustained collective purpose. The frozen wilderness worlds they managed to seed during these centuries-long voyages became more than mere outposts. They were the foundational roots of core-sept worlds upon which they would build an interstellar society, cultural and administrative hearts radiating influence within their localized cluster, despite the tortoise-like pace limiting their sphere of influence. By the first sphere's conclusion, 8 distinct septs had established their own evolving identities, while remaining integrated into the unified Tava paradigm. Tau Prime itself became unchallenged spiritual, political heartland brimming, with nascent industry caste complexes surrounding the ethereal matriarchal lodges, overlooking vast equatorial promenade's seat of governance, evolved into structures of logical grace only they understand. Sasha forged its legacy on discipline and honor, consecrating vast training grounds where Ardas drills echoed beneath green skies. Viola, animated under its blazing twin suns, fostered a particularly aggressive interpretation of the fire caste ethos honed in brutal heat, producing warrior elites renowned throughout burgeoning drone networks. Enclave World Daleth blossomed as the nascent gateway welcoming alien auxiliary contingents and merchant envoys within regulated exchange zones, defining early awareness of Xeno's existence. Its densely populated arcologies whispered with unfamiliar languages and cultural artifacts traded under ethereal oversight. Each sept proudly emblazoned its distinct colors across battle armor plating and ship hulls. Each developed unique variations in tactical doctrine, reflecting environmental adaptations, passed down mentors to cadets, namely superiors accelerating drills, subtly refined engineering preferences reflected in industrial output visible skyline, and utterly dissimilar art styles decorating ceremonial crutoxic ceremonial relics repositories, enriching the unified empire through their diversity of perspective. Encouragingly supported by the Ethereals actively encouraging this regional divergence within the Tava framework, it demonstrated strategic wisdom exploiting strengths grounded by circumstance, rather than prescribing rigid conformity. It became an organizing principle, ensuring flexibility not contradiction. The second sphere of expansion wavered into horizon only once scientific advancement yielded the theoretical breakthrough of limited faster partial fold space transit mechanism, enabling leapfrog across voids previously requiring untold lifetimes traversing. This capability, restricted by specific gravity requirements and requiring immense calculations, navigated by dedicated Earth caste scholars, piloting vessels through dangerous transitional phase between realities, conferring prototype starships typically mounted vast sensor arrays, ringed experimental drive systems, opening new frontiers, finally beckoned properly explored, seeming mercifully faster progress, meaning several star systems, simultaneously pending exploration teams deployed within shortened generation. Timeline beginning ascent towards genuine stellar citizenship ambition, forged sustained sacrifice. The steady drumming against the fortress stone hadn't ceased, if anything deepening as twilight claimed port vigilance, winding damp gray veils between sea and sky that mirrored the haze settling in Cato Torrentus's bones. Hours had passed since the first line flowed from his quill. Now, amidst the mingled scents of salt, petrichor, smoldering hearth ash, cold spice-laced shaw, and the comforting tang of fresh ink on parchment, he finally set down his pen. Shadows stretched long and deep in his sanctuary, driven back only by the warm, amber constellations cast by the additional candles he'd been forced to ignite. Their fluttering light caught the air's suspended dust, transforming motes into drifting stars that orbited his weary movements, playing across the pages before him, a landscape of light and shadow mirroring the profound complexities he'd spent decades unraveling. His fingers ached, knuckles stiff with damp and age, yet a deep, scholarly satisfaction welled within him as he leaned back, surveying the final page. The Tau were rendered now, not merely as dossier entries delimiting an abstract Xenos threat, but as a young species reaching for the stars with a vibrant, unified determination echoing humanity's own nascent dreams, before the long night choked its wonder beneath millennia of fear. Somewhere beyond his rain-lashed window, the percussive roar of a merchant vessel settling onto rain-slick Ferrocrete briefly challenged the gloom, followed by the muffled clang of a settlement bell swallowed by the wet air. Torrentus traced fingers over the parchment's texture, feeling the subtle indentations his quill had pressed, noting how the pervasive moisture had caused the ink to bloom feather-soft edges, blurring his precise characters into an oddly poetic script. Would these words ever find eyes truly willing to see? He wondered, the familiar melancholy weight settling heavier, steeped in fatigue and the deep bone chill of his years. Would his work vanish into the lightless gulfs of imperial archives, merely another silent testament to a forgotten scholar's dangerous curiosity? And yet beneath that weariness, beneath the profound sense of futility, a small, defiant flame flickered a hope that perhaps, impossibly, another soul like his own might one day find these pages and recognize within the Tau not annihilation, but a reflection of humanity's own lost potential, buried deep beneath monuments to a stagnant god-emperor and the grinding millstones of bureaucracy. Beyond the streaked pane, the lights of the port town flickered hesitantly to life against the encroaching dark, beacons against the ancient, inherited dread of the night. Comfortable though the rational mind found enlightenment, Torrentus acknowledged that ancestral shiver, finding solace in these small victories against the dark, these affirmations that the night was not absolute. With movements deliberate despite the deep weariness in his limbs, he gathered the precious pages, tapping them into perfect alignment before sliding them into the oiled leather case, a shield against the imperial damp. For a fleeting moment, his hand rested atop it, feeling the residual warmth its surface had absorbed from him, carrying a fragment of his life, his labored breath. The rain maintained its rhythm, a constant companion to his life of scholarship, from youthful beginnings on Hydraffer's misty academies to this rain-shrouded exile. Its unceasing murmur seemed to speak of greater truths, that empires rise and crest and inevitably recede like tides, that stars persist beyond the fleeting ambitions of any species, that true power often resides not in conquest, but in the deep well of understanding. He closed his eyes in the candle's flicker, and in that sudden inner quiet, they materialized effortlessly. The Tau, blue-skinned figures moving beneath alien constellations, assembling cities and vessels with the potent blend of hope and resolve humanity had once known. He saw the serene guidance of the Ethereals, stoic water-caste diplomats weaving fragile alliances across the void, earth-caste architects meticulously reworking harsh geology into sustainable futures, air-caste pilots tracing precise vectors through stellar currents, fire warriors standing as grim shields, disparate castes united as limbs of one purpose, advancing the banner of their greater good across the galaxy, world by painstaking world. And in that brief, fragile moment, Torrentus dared a forbidden thought, a dagger thrust into the heart of the imperial truth. What might humanity have become had we walked a similar path? What celestial heights dwelled within our grasp before the darkness shredded our unity and drowned our curiosity in the cold brine of superstition and eternal war? What marvels remain undiscovered beneath the calcified layers of 10,000 years of stagnant dogma? The questions hung thick in the damp air, resonating like the distant cry of seabirds lost on the rain-swept waters beyond the port. A sharper volley against the windowpane signaled the storm's renewed vigor, shattering the reverie. Torrentus sighed, a sound woven from profound weariness and a thread of hard-won resolve that would see the work continue. He pushed himself up, bones protesting the long stillness, the scholar yielding once more to the archivist. Tomorrow demanded his vigilance, assembling fragmented intelligence on the expanding Tau Empire from desperate refugees, cagey merchants, intercepted signals, smuggled xenotech. Tomorrow required the mask of detached imperial scholarship, flawless and impenetrable, concealing the dangerous ember of empathy smoldering within. But tonight, just for these few, silent moments, as the cleansing rain washed over Port Vigilance's old stones and the tide swelled against salt-whitened piers, Cato Torrentus simply surrendered to the elemental music. It was a melody older than creed, older than galactic empires, older than the bloody divides that scarred the stars. Within its unending rhythm pulsed no imperial sermon extolling the master of mankind, no elegant treatise outlining the tenets of the greater good, but something foundational and vast. It was the enduring whisper that all powers fade, all certainties erode, and all empires, however grand their banners, are but transient ripples on the surface of a deeper, timeless sea. This critical section unveils not just an expansion, but the essence of the Tau Empire's struggle against an indifferent galaxy. Remember the three spheres, early, tentative steps colliding with established starfaring cultures, notably humanity, culminating in the pivotal, devastating shock of crossing the Damocles Gulf to truly encounter the monolithic terror of the Imperium of Man. From that crucible emerged the lessons for the Third Sphere expansion, spearheaded by Commander Shadowsun with a newfound, pragmatic duality military conquest and diplomatic outreach working in tandem. Yet underpinning it all remains the glacial reality of interstellar distance. Their slower warp travel isn't merely an inconvenience, it dictates a fundamental reality of their dominion. Fleets born across known space cannot rapidly pivot to confront unexpected swarms from unclean stars tearing at a far border. Command decisions relayed by courier ships travel with agonizing lethargy compared to the Imperium's chaotic but instantaneous astropathic cries. Strategic foresight must encompass vast stretches of void time, demanding projections measured in seasons and years, forcing commanders to plan engagements against possibilities unfolding like the slow growth of ancient trees. Necessity thus forged a framework alien to the Imperium's central dogma, a network of highly autonomous septs. Each one functions as a self-sustaining core unto itself, its governors empowered far beyond imperial norms, operating with minimal oversight from the Ethereal Council. Worlds develop unique defenses calibrated to their threats, industries robust enough to weather years of isolation sealed within the envelope of hostile warp signatures or strangling blockades. This localized resilience, born from necessity, becomes a quiet strength woven into the fabric of their expanding civilization. The path ahead is fraught with shadows. Each conquered ring beyond the nascent core brings the burgeoning Tau closer to the titanic, entrenched leviathan that is the Imperium of Man, with its unfathomable reserves of ancient technology and endlessly teeming ranks. The tendrils of Hive Fleet Gorgon prove nightmares exist beyond even the Imperial dark. The rising echoes stirring within ancient Necronter tomb worlds introduce calculations entirely unforeseen, variables defying Tau systems. Yet within the councils of the Ethereals, distant command ships and the humming warums of sept capitals, these monumental obstacles coalesce less as looming threats, more as complex problems awaiting the only solution known: decompress, analyze, execute the optimal function. Where others might face despair at the imbalance of scale and history, the Tau perceive profound opportunity woven into their very nature. Their rigidly defined but dynamically evolving culture fuels an unceasing cascade of technological innovation, quite distinct from imperial stagnation. New solutions emerge not from forgotten vaults, but from collaborative projects humming with progress. Watercast diplomats, honed on encounters across alien worlds, deftly transform danger into dialogue, shifting hostile factions into cautious fellow travelers. Their fleets, though traversing the stars at a meditative pace compared to bolt-fast imperial strikes, grow indisputably mightier and more numerous year upon year. Crucially, their perception of temporal scale stands fundamentally opposed to the Imperium's. Imperial thought is anchored in millennia gone, its identity forged through preserving the ossified remnants of a long-lost golden age imagined and re-imaged through 10,000 years of calcified ritual. The Tau look perpetually forward. Their society measures history in centuries and millennia yet to come. Each ethereal considers trajectories far beyond the lifespan of a single being. This long-view reality reframes immediate setbacks. They are mere incidents within a grander, meticulously charted progression towards a future perfected. This strategy finds tangible expression in their foundational philosophy of settlement. Earth-cast planners expend their genius not on immediate exploitation, but sculpting planetary destinies unfolding across centuries. Massive atmospheric processors might labor silently for decades, preparing a world slowly blooming into habitability long before colonization vessels arrive. Aqueducts and ecological systems are constructed to endure for generations without requiring Rutanstem renewal. City foundations beneath alien skies are hammered into substrates capable of accommodating growth scales the initial settlers cannot grasp, designed with expansion imbued into their very gridwork. As the Tau continue their steady press outwards, nibbling ever further from their central septs, the challenges escalate. The Damocles Gulf, once the ultimate frontier fraught with terror and revelation, is now merely one contested zone among many swirling with the pressures of rivals ancient and emergent. Yet the very core of the Tau approach remains unchanged, echoing like a mantra across disciplines and castes. Observe the intricate whole. Analyze the vast flow of data. Isolate crucial currents and eddies hiding potential leverage. Adapt doctrine, technology, diplomacy, societal structures as required. Advance the greater good, function by necessary function. The Watercast navigate the treacherous channels of negotiation and alliance. The Earthcast reweave reality, turning inhospitable rock and void into infrastructure humming with longevity. The Aircast master the immensity between stars, linking isolated gems within the septs. And the Firecasts stand vigilant, prepared to excise existential threats with methodical precision. The Empire persists, its blue-white flag unfurling against the eternal twilight of the galaxy's turbulent depths, propelled by logic, resilience, and that singular, unwavering perspective of deep time. The quiet resolve etched onto the face of Archivist Cato Torrentus mirrored the resolve he'd chronicled. He understood the machinery he served, the grinding engines of suspicion and destruction. He would continue observing, dissecting, reporting. Yet as the deep rhythms of the ancient sea pulsed beneath distant thunder and drumming rain, that small, treacherous spark of empathy remained, fed by the thought of humanity's squandered potential, and the quiet, hopeful persistence echoing on Tau worlds beneath alien constellations. Outside, Port Vigilance's glow fought valiantly against the night, humanity's eternal battle inscribed in light. But beneath it, older and deeper, flowed the sea's profound music, a murmured command that resonated more truly, whispering only of the deep currents beyond the flicker of empire.